Hello, hello, hello. If you can see us and hear us, please do let us know. We would actually really appreciate it because I don't trust these things ever. Because
I
the one
particularly
time you
don't
do,
trust it. Yeah, I particularly don't trust it today because from my end, Ryan is coming through really kind of jittery and metallic, and I can't decide if it's a me thing or a him thing.
I was gonna say everything looks perfectly normal on my side, so hopefully it's just a your side thing, because then we'd be able to just studiously ignore it.
I would love for you all to tell us if it's me that's coming in a little bit metallic, or whether it's Ryan, or whether it's neither of us, and it seems to be just perfect, and I'm the only one with an issue at my side.
Cheers. Third time's the charm. Yeah, the QUEEK has been throwing a bit of a temper tantrum over the last week or so. Understandably, he has not had his dues for far too long, I'd say.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
Both look and sound fine. Because, good.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that because it doesn't sound fine at my end. It suggests I've got a bit of an issue with my internet connection somewhere through the ether. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one because, well, it's been one heck of a Christmas at this side, particularly because I've been ill, just really ill. My whole body decided it didn't like Christmas. Christmas was not to be done. And today is the first day that I have tentatively come back out into the real world, and I'm feeling a little bit off.
Well, hopefully that will be one of the last final bars of this year. And also, I apologize if anyone hears dog barking. My brother's dogs are visiting.
I can hear them. Appears to be running around in circles, perhaps.
No, so they're finishing the shed outside, so they're putting siding on. So you might occasionally hear hammer beats. And
I can hear all right.
Barks. And I'm gonna close the door here and see if that helps a little bit. One moment.
Yeah, so it was my daughter's birthday just the other day, and I had to sit it out. I couldn't go, and they did all manner of cool shit, and I wasn't allowed to be part of that because, well, I was poorly. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that today I get to just relax, sit down, and watch Ryan discuss QUEEK for another 3 hours because this is his penance for not doing that video. It's really good. I love the QUEEK videos. We should have more of them. We should have a QUEEK part 3 just so that I could sit back for another whole stream and go, yes, and let's discuss Ryan discussing the subject at hand.
You know, as much as I love endless rat milking, I do think at some point it gets gratuitous. You know, people get sore after a certain amount of time. You got to stop. But yeah, today should be a good time. It should be like a nice little kind of chill, kind of the perfect way to end the year, really, is just kind of with a nice little chill, relaxing stream of rambling about lore nonsense. And today we're going to be getting into some pretty bizarre stuff as well, because we're going to be delving into the end times as kind of the main focus, as well as some random theorizing and such, because QUEEK actually had one of the densest parts of the end times. Surprisingly, it was very funny to get the book titled Thankful, and Thankful only shows up for like maybe a fifth of the book. He's like, he doesn't really do a whole lot compared to QUEEK and Scroll, but QUEEK is by far the main character.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting look at the end times as well, because often our discussions with the end times are, let's be generous, a bit negative. And we tend to really lay into the end times because the end times was not very well constructed. And for all it may have had beautiful, brilliant initial ideas put in place, they were not particularly well executed. And it felt like a big rushed mess at the end and hardly the fitting end to Warhammer Fantasy, that great setting Games Workshop had put in place. But today, we're not really going to be tearing a new one that much because the end times material for QUEEK, unlike the rest of the end times material, was not just deep. There's a lot of it, and it's pretty good. This is not one where we're going to be bashing the end times. In fact, this is one where we're much more likely to say there's lots of really cool stories here that can be potentially mined for versions of the end times that you might want to play in your games, or alternatively, just mined for good ideas, because there's some good stuff in here.
Yeah, it's It was definitely one of the books. Thankful, whenever it comes to rating the End Times books, I really felt that the Thankful book, which is mostly about QUEEK, is definitely the second strongest of the overall series.
Oh, you loved Kane first, didn't you?
Yeah, Kane, by far the greatest book, he says, as he casts it down to the bottom of the fiery pit. I always put announcements in the wrong page, and it annoys the hell out of me that I'm bad about that. There we go. I always like to put it in the server news and not streams. Ugh.
Yeah, so server news isn't going to help because it doesn't go out to the other ones. But if you do it in the Lorebeards streams, it's got a nice little published.
Yeah, now it's up.
Yeah, excellent, perfect, thanks.
But anyway, so because I very much agree with Andy of that it's a reasonably strong entry. Because it has a pretty focused narrative, which is kind of what all the books should have been. Like when they kind of have we're going to focus on these particular conflicts, it tends to work a lot better than when they're trying to, in the case of like Glotkin, overly focus on one singular fight, which wastes just a ton of time, but also like Kane, which was trying to do too much all at once, because it was like, well, let's tell the entire racial story in a single book, which is, species story even, and it was, good God, that was,
and also attempting to tell the species story for one of the most important factions for Warhammer and how it had been set up. And it was a story that needed at least 2, if not 3 books. And yeah, it was flubbed. Flopped. It just wasn't very well done. And the great changes that it offered were left looking like really neophyte storytelling, really bad storytelling, because it just didn't feel set up at all or warranted, particularly when you look at some of the stories for how the gods were handled. There was some potentially really good ideas in there, but because there was no setup for it, the execution felt like it came from nowhere and made no sense. And to this day, it still looks like it comes from nowhere and makes no sense.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into things.
Before we dive in, my connection to you is absolutely terrible, Ryan. So you're coming through really metallic at this side. So I'm going to try and log out and come back in again and see if that fixes my connection at my side. So apologies as I dive out for a second. I will be with you on the other side. I'll only be about 30 seconds. See you all in a moment.
Yeah, but today should be just kind of a nice chill thing. Ultimately, we're going to be focusing just on QUEEK, and well, not just on QUEEK, but everything around him as well. And as a reminder, this is the second to last show of the year. We are going to be having a bit of an end of year celebration stream over on
oh, that's so much better.
Tuesday. Oh, good.
Oh, I mean, I was sitting there. You're on your, from my perspective, you're doing this. Hi, my name is Ryan, and I am going to talk about QUEEK. Yes,
that's the perfect way to do a QUEEK stream. I should really just do that the entire time.
Oh, that's so much better. I'm sitting here cringing each time.
Yeah, but yeah, as was saying, hopefully you all had wonderful Christmas and are enjoying your holidays and stuff. We do have one more show before the end of the year where we'll be here on Tuesday, and it'll be kind of the end of year celebration of going over everything that's happened in 2025, which is actually a lot. And kind of just having a casual Q&A chatter and all that other stuff. So that should be a good time.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good time. If you just want to chill out with your favorite Lorebeards and your favorite lore seekers, that's going to be the day to do it, because we're going to be doing that classic anything goes thing that we sometimes do. And if you've got 1,000 questions that you've been sitting there desperate to ask us, that's the time to come and pose them in our direction, because we don't really have a great topic at hand to deal with. So we might end up waxing lyrical about almost anything, depending upon what it is that you yourselves would like to bring us to our table.
Yeah, should be a good time.
Yeah, it should be.
Let's get into super chat stuff. Biofoot, Merry Queekmas. Yes, Mass Queek. 6 seasons and it cuts off. Clearly he was killed Clearly he was killed by Queek for talking too much before he finished that sentence. 6 seasons in a movie. Oh, good God. Captain Magma, which Chaos God sphere would Pennywise from It be lumped in? Okay, I have to say, I'm glad you brought this up because I do want to say, for anyone that hasn't been watching, HBO has put out a new series called Welcome to Derry, which is like a prequel show. It's really fucking good. It is really good. And I've been wanting to do a video about it because they kind of, not intentionally, but there's a lot of really good parallels between Warhammer Demons and how Pennywise works in the show. Where Pennywise actually gets like a little monologue to explain how he experiences time, and it's so good. It's so good for if you're trying to understand Warhammer Demons.
Yeah, I freaking love Welcome to Derry. I introduced it to my youngest because that was a great way to get her to see stuff that might be perhaps a bit on the freaky side. We ended up watching all of it, part 1 and part 2 as well, and even discussed the original It as well in terms of the TV series, not the book. Although we discussed the book a bit as well, which made some interesting choices. And I also recommend it. It is a great series. There's in fact a lot of really good telly on just now. I'm making my way through Pluribus as well. Not making my way, I've just literally finished it. And it's brilliant too. Really enjoyed that. Vince Gilligan at his script writing best, I think. It was good.
Yeah, some good stuff. So in any event, what would it be lumped into? I mean, I think if you were going to try and portray it realistically, it would probably end up being some kind of very bizarre solo entity falling more under Chaos Undivided. Then I wouldn't really lump it in with anyone because I think that would kind of take away from it. And it would stand very, very well on its own. Like, agreed. Very well.
Yeah. One of the mistakes of many writers of Chaos, and indeed many of players who engage with Warhammer, is to try and make everything one of the big 4 Chaos powers, largely because that's often how it's portrayed in 40k. And there are far more fans of 40k out there than there are Warhammer, where Warhammer has a really deep, broad, not just Chaos Pantheon, but Pantheon in general, and all manner of crazy etheric entities. And it almost certainly works best there and works perfectly in that particular sphere as well. Doesn't need to have any other greater god telling it what to do or being a part of this greater power. It is its own unique entity, and I think it fits in very well. That's lots of dingles coming from your side there.
Yes. Yeah, just sorry.
You're popular.
Yeah, the world likes to wait until I'm doing something and then is like, oh, by the way, here's a billion things, when like no one was bothering me at all earlier in the week. But anyway,
I'm going to mark that comment from Holy Artist over on Twitch as well, just to make sure we get to it.
Thank you. So with that out of the are they working? Have we done the Twitch thing? No,
they're not working. No, which is why I'm marking it. Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, I will say, if you were holding a gun to my head and asked me where to put him, if you had to do one of the 4, I think you could make arguments for all 4 actually pretty easily. Khorne would definitely be the weakest argument, but you still could argue it. Most people would probably spit out Tzeentch. Because Tzeentch is just always, frankly, the easiest to make work, especially when you're dealing with a shapeshifter. But I do think there are some extremely strong arguments for Slaanesh and Nurgle.
Agreed on both sides. Yeah, in fact, I don't just agree with this. I wholly agree with it. Arguments could be made for them all, but I think that in the greater scheme of things, if we were to weigh up the arguments for those 4 and put them all on one side of the scale, and then on the other side of the scale, put the arguments for it being an individual entity, all 4 of those combined are massively outweighed with the arguments for the other side. And on that side, the heaviest argument probably lies with Tzeentch or Slaanesh. Maybe Nurgle. That's pretty heavy too.
Yeah, I would. I think if it was
pretty heavy,
if it was up to me, I would probably say Slaanesh based on how it actually is as an entity.
Agreed.
But you could definitely make arguments for other stuff.
Yeah, particularly given Slaanesh often has a lot to do with glamoring as well and making things appear to be something else. So there's a lot that you could tie in there that would work quite well. But if I was doing it personally, I'd much prefer for it to be an individual entity.
Oh, yeah, because fear is a genuinely underutilized emotional sphere within the fantasyverse from Chaos. There are other groups that use it very, very effectively. Getting Gleeful, which era of the Warhammer world would have less magic, pre-Old One or post-Vortex? Also, did the Old Ones arrive, then construct the portals, or did the portals appear and then they arrive through them? So, the first question should technically be pre-Old One should have the least amount of magic. Because even post-Vortex, there's still a lot. It gets pushed out back into the ether, but it's like having a waterfall and then putting like a dam to direct the water out as opposed to it hitting you. But there's still a lot of it that's like around the world and getting caught in pockets and all this other stuff. That being said, it gets a little wibbly wobbly, especially the more the old world develops, because the old world is like, the old one's more like filtered magic, but there was still a lot of it, which makes sense. Like the geomantic web was like a natural barrier or a natural system to catch the world's like natural magic, which means it was already there. And you had groups like the Famir contacting the Chaos Gods seemingly before the arrival of the Old Ones or very, very quickly after. So like there was a lot going on pre-Old Ones, which definitely implies that there was magic, but it wasn't magic as we understand it post-Vortex. But that's how the old world kind of pitches it. So your mileage is going to vary. I think that's personal interpretation more than anything.
So I'm going to take this question from a slightly different angle, because if we take it directly from the various writers who've attempted to answer this inside Warhammer products, the answer is exactly as Ryan suggests, variable, because different writers have different opinions. Now, behind the scenes, I've discussed this with some of the writers, and some of them, one of them, a very influential writer who I will not call out in stream, said there was no magic before, to which I literally said to his face, bullshit. Here's all the examples of magic that was there before the Cataclysm. All of this stuff definitely had magic, to which he went, yeah, but that's just misunderstanding and this, that, and the other. And I was like, interesting take. Interesting. And similarly, I've had another writer tell me, oh, this cushion's really bugging me. Go away. Keeps on hitting my back. I had another silly magnet, wasn't doing its job. I had another writer try to tell me there was much less magic after the Vortex than there was in any previous era. And he had a relatively well-constructed argument. It was bullshit, but it was really well-constructed. Now, that means both of those writers who have completely different views and both of whom who have written extensively on this matter have both influenced the writing. And now you can see why it's a bit confused, because different writers have different views. So when I'm answering this one, and to give my answer, it's a £10 one. Thank you very much for this one. I'll take a little bit more time. It's Christmas. Screw QUEEK. Let's take the more holistic view, the bigger story of what Warhammer is, and then say, why did the old ones come? What was the Warhammer world? And is the answer there? And we know loosely why the old ones came. The Fated Place was special. The Warhammer world was different to anywhere else because of the magic that was inherent within it and the potential of it exploding out and creating, effectively, Age of Sigmar. So that means magic has always been there, always. Now, how you want to interpret what the proto-magic was, what the geomantic web did, what the winds of magic were, and how they manifested, what would eventually become realms of Gyron and Actui and whatever else, how you wish to take each stage is going to be up to you. It's certainly up to the individual writers who have all taken different views. But if you take a look at the overall picture of what Warhammer is and why it is, you can immediately start going, okay, I get it. So there was always magic there. There had to be, because the potential was there. And the Cataclysm blows it up in some regard and lets it all out. And then as it comes out in a new form, which it was not originally in that form, and blasts around the world, it almost destroys it. The elves channel it out using the Vortex, but all that magic's still there. And it's now getting funneled back into the aether. And then eventually, come the end times, the whole thing blows up. The magic's pretty much equal throughout, but manifesting in different ways throughout, as each one goes through its own processes for channeling, controlling, and keeping that magic in place. Think of it a little bit like lava that's sitting inside the mantle of the earth. That that mantle's always full of magic. I mean, lava. It's always there, that magic, that lava. It's right underneath my feet right now, just a few kilometers down. It's churning away like mad. That's the geomantic web. And then it spurts out like crazy at various points around the world. There's your volcanoes. And there's our magic being released into the world in various places. Now, could the entire world go magma? Yes. Could some cataclysmic event cause the entire world to turn into a gigantic world of basically lava, molten rock? Easily, yes. All sorts of cataclysms can cause that. And the Warhammer world goes through multiple cataclysms. But the amount of magic never really changes. It's just expressing in different ways. It's at different temperatures, if you will.
Yeah, that being said, the second part of your question is actually super easy to answer. Did the old ones arrive first and then make the portals, or the other way around? Yeah, the old ones showed up first and the portals were built later because certain Slaanesh generations worked on them.
Yeah, and this is a relatively well-established part of the story where the silver ships arrive, not necessarily through portals. Now, they might have used portal technology, and by that, we could say warp gates, similar to how 40k they move through the warp. And in fact, they almost certainly did, but the fixed portals came later.
Gideon, who has the most grudges, Skaven or Greenskins? So there is actually an interesting quote. I don't remember exactly where it's written. It might show up in the end times, actually. But there's a quote that says something along the lines of, the oldest grudges are against the Greenskins, but the most are against the Skaven.
It's as good an answer as any. I'll take the question from a completely different angle because the answer is that, basically. My one's going to be the Skaven hold far more grudges against everyone else than the Greenskins do. Greenskins kind of don't care.
Man, I kind of wish we had opened with that and just moved on. He would have been pissed. Stephen Lucas, what if Cruel Boys was in fantasy episode? So we're going to be diving into some AOS stuff starting next year. We already have the Marathi one on the docket, but
have we put a time up for that?
Not officially yet, but it'll be in January.
Yeah. How about we use that as a nice end of January stream?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
So if you want to see us discuss Age of Sigmar and Marathi, keep your eyes on our streams over on YouTube because the first date for that will be coming up relatively soon.
Yeah, I can't wait for what I'm going to be doing this week where I have to take screenshots of a whole bunch of shit and send it to Andy to be like, read all of this. But it'll be a good time.
It's about time I started up my library for Age of Sigmar. I don't have a library for Age of Sigmar, and I'm a perennial collector. I might just go and buy all the books.
Sure. Well, then I'll send you a book list because some of them are surprisingly niche.
And I'll read them all because I am who I am.
Yep. But doing an episode about talking about could like some of the AOS factions that have been introduced exist in fantasy, that could be a very fun Wednesday episode. That'd be great. Yeah,
and I think that stating my clear ignorance here, because I don't know a great deal about Age of Sigmar, and I've kept myself, pardon me, in the dark for a reason. I do think that a significant amount of Age of Sigmar can be backported without much problem.
So easily.
And it wouldn't be an imposition to do so. It's not let's take this cool idea in Age of Sigmar and port it back because we want it in Warhammer. It's more it should have been in Warhammer, and the reason it's in Age of Sigmar was probably because it was in Warhammer and it never really got fleshed out, and now they've had more time to think about these stuff. They've come up with new things which should be back there too.
Yeah, honestly, we could probably make it like a really easy tier list, with the tier list being like how easy they would fit into the setting. That could be a fun way to do that.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one.
Because like doing an idea of like, oh, could they? The answer is just yes. It's literally just yes. Azure Shadow, off topic, but why does GW use dice in a singular firm? Because GW is silly.
God, it annoys me. So I'm a bit special. We don't often discuss this, but when it comes to language, I like to use language correctly. I remember having a big, long discussion with a bunch of editor friends of mine, and one of them who had more qualifications than you can shake a stick at, came to me and went, Andy, what have you done? Because you have clearly had a lot of training in language, because you are coming back on the text that I've done and putting out really pernickety detail concerning language and how it's being deployed in terms of the grammar, in terms of the structure, and in terms of the individual punctuation marks or whatever else. And I really enjoy it because nobody generally catches all this stuff, and you're doing it where generally most editors nowadays just go for the flow of the text, and often that is secondary to the rule, to where I'm like, yeah, the flow of text is super important, but the rules are also important to ensure that there is a singular clarity of message and use of language. And I said, none. I just kept on learning and learning and learning and learning and learning and learning and never stopping. And this is one that bugs me because it's not a necessity. It is an assumption that the reading audience is stupid and can't cope with the singular use of die, and dice as plural is too complicated for kids to understand. Wrong. So wrong that it's almost condescending. And I have had this discussion with more than one rules writer, and it has become a standard for many writers within the gaming sphere, particularly those who are ex-Games Workshop, to always use dice as singular, because, you know, that'll help, you know, foreign readers, and it'll help. No, it doesn't. Everyone knows it.
Makes it more confusing for those people.
Yeah, and they know language. It makes it oftentimes much more difficult to parse what's actually going on. But worse, there's many ways you can get around this by, for example, never needing to use the word dice by using, for example, D6. So you never need to use dice or die. You just go 1d6, 2d6, 3d6, and have a nice little discussion at the beginning of your book saying, our book uses this word to discuss dice. And you never need to use singular die or singular dice at all. But no, people love it.
And when you're reading the rules and it says to throw a dice, and you're like, did they mean 2d6 or did they mean 1d6? But they're not using the right term. Like what? What are you saying?
It's really weird to me because I, in general speech, use single die, multiple dice, and when I read it, it jars hard in text, but. That's just the way it is.
Joe Miller, In Time should have been the 50-plus book length nonsense that the Horse Heresy was. Yeah. Like even if they wanted to do a bit of a campaign that like wrapped up in a specific amount of time, there should have been like a let's make Black Library books and see how well they sell series. And if they sold well, then just keep going. But yeah, no, they didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
BioFlip. Oh, I'm prepared for the AMA. Are you two? Yeah.
Given the last set of questions you threw at me, BioFlip, I am not prepared. For those of you who missed it, QUEEK was meant to pop up as a topic for a stream, twice in the last wee while. One time, sadly, Ryan had to bow out. The other time, sadly, I had to bow out. And we're finally here, obviously discussing QUEEK as we are right now. And BioFoot threw a whole bunch of relatively random, nothing to do with Warhammer or anything else questions in my direction, to which I didn't know the answer to a couple, which is really annoying. Like, for example, what is the dot on an I called? And it really bugged me. I couldn't remember what it was called. I had to look it up. I was so annoyed. It's a tittle, by the way. And that annoyed me because I knew it at the back of my brain. I just couldn't fish the information out in time.
That's very funny. See, I'm comfortable just being like, I don't fucking know, and then we move on.
But I did know. That was the most annoying part.
Watchdog, will there be any guests in this end of year stream? It's probably just gonna be me and Andy. We might do something early. I have some ideas rattling around for we might do something early next year where we try and have a bunch of the Lorebeards on. I don't know if we can have all at once because that's a lot of people. In a StreamYard's call at the same time. But
StreamYards can handle like 20 easily. Yeah. I've done a show with 20. Yeah.
I would anticipate a full Lorebeards cast thing sometime early next year. But I will say that in January we are going to be having 2 of the Elf God streams on the schedule. So I'll be doing some stuff with Vera and Lindsay. And there's also some upcoming. There's a lot coming up. I'll just leave it at that.
Yep. Also, if you haven't picked up the Skarsnik novel yet for book club, go bloody get a copy and read it. because Scarsnip Book Club will be next. It's such a great book. And we didn't have a physical copy in our house, so now we do, and it's really nice. But to help Lindsay along with that, I also bought her a new Kindle just in case she does need to pick up a digital copy of something.
Delightful. Mortality. Are the Skaven already a thing in the old world? Yes. If of the known lords, who is born and who is not, I guess they are missing some key tech inventions and units. Ha ha ha. So, unfortunately, you are assuming that Games Workshop cares about making sure their technology follows a linear timeline. They do not.
No, they don't.
Yeah, Old World, as of right now, literally has all the exact same tech as the setting will have 200 years later. Which is really confusing, but it's because GW wants to use the minis that they've already made, and they don't care. Now, this might get retconned later, but...
In fact, if anything, not only do they not care, they justify it. Like, for example, when you take a look at the discussions they had about the steam tanks, where the steam tanks were quite clearly written as they were built all the way back many hundreds of years ago by Leonardo da Merigliano. And he put together the steam tank plans and in his life made 12 of them. Pretty well established lore. And they went, yeah, nah. That's all just lies. And in the old world times, there's like hundreds of them all over the place. And come the end times, they have forgotten that there used to be hundreds of them, and they now think there's only 12 legendary ones, and that's all that exists. To which I was like, seriously? That's the story?
Yeah,
that makes no sense at all.
Yeah, one thing I genuinely believe is that with the old world being very successful, which it is, like it's had a very successful first 2 years. And they're starting to take it more and more seriously, and we're actually getting like storylines and stuff. I would not be shocked if like around 2nd or 3rd edition, when we start getting like actually unique model ranges for things like the Empire, they might start phasing out some of the technology that hasn't been invented yet and go back to saying, oh no, that's not a thing yet. But like,
I would love that because it would make more sense. It feels like a first edition of a rule set that is desperate to spend as little money as possible, so thus can use every single previous miniature ever used without worrying too much about tech and similar. But if it is as successful as we hope it will be, and it becomes its own line with an entire range of miniatures for every faction that it deploys, then they'll be in a position where they can say, you know what we did in the previous edition? We're now rewriting that. And Games Workshop does this with every edition anyway. So don't be surprised if this happens.
Yeah, but to TLDR the rest of your question, Skaven have been around for thousands of years at this point.
Yeah,
they've even have several really, really big invasions. Like this is post Black Plague Wars. This is post the war against the Lizardmen, all that other stuff. As far as like known lords who's been born and not, by
Council 13.
Yeah, if they haven't been born yet, they're really close to being born. All of the Council of 13 that we have in the modern era,
they're all done.
Yeah, they're about to become the Council of 13.
Pretty much.
And there's a couple of key characters who are said to be around at this time, like Ikit Claw's already around. It's implied but not guaranteed that Lord Skrulk is already around. Go watch our Lord Skrulk stream.
Go watch our one. He's probably super ancient by this time.
Yeah, those are the two big ones. Most of the other Skaven special characters are more regular Skaven aged, so they're relatively young. Yeah, they're like single digits, double digits at most. So other than that, yeah. Getting gleeful, if QUEEK killed Luther Harkin, would all of his personality speak to him through his skull? That's an excellent question. The answer, it would probably depend on who was writing it. I would think the answer would be yes.
Yes. I think the answer definitely would be yes. And if somebody wrote it without the yes, their editor should give them a quick slap and say, oi, no, do QUEEK, please. The answer should be yes.
Yeah. And that is actually, I think, a perfect spot to take a pause on Super Chats and actually do a little chatter about QUEEK for a bit, because we're 3 minutes in.
And because this is part 2, I'm in this beautiful position where one of the reasons why we could do ourselves a big, long Super Chat marathon before we go is because we don't really need an intro, because we already have one, which is go watch our first video where we dive into, or should I say more realistically, Ryan dives into QUEEK for a good 3-hour discussion about all the things that he did and didn't do do during his life leading up to the end times. Because we don't need an intro today. We've got one. What we need instead today is simply, what are we covering? And what are we covering? End times, QUEEK, and a good discussion about other QUEEky topics along the way. That's it. That's how much work I've got to do today. I'm now going to sit back and smile as my co-host Ryan deep dives into the end times with QUEEK, and I just go, oh, really? Really? This is penance? Penance for not doing the QUEEK video? Really? Really?
Oh, I can't wait until the guilt stream. In any event, so that right. So no intro. We're pretty much just going to jump in where we left off, which last time we got through pretty much everything in QUEEK's life leading up to the end times. We skirted over a couple little things, which I might touch on a bit as we go, particularly revolving around the incident at Karakazul, which is actually a good place to start because that leads into the end times. Because QUEEK is one of the characters that had the advantage of having David Geimer write for him, and it's set up for 8th edition, which set up for the end times. So his story was actually well designed for where the world went. Of that, after what goes down at Karakazul, where QUEEK is sent to stop Karakazul, who has been pumping out very high quality weapons that are being shipped out all across the Katazan Corps and being sold most notably to a lot of mercenaries and folks that are using them against the Skaven, and it's actually becoming a problem. So he goes over there, and the plan was that QUEEK was supposed to destroy Karakazul, but QUEEK being QUEEK, basically sabotaged all of the plans that were supposed to actually go down because there's a Gracier involved and one of the former warlords of Carrick 8 Sleek Sharpwit, and QUEEK just hates all of them. He hates them all because they are all basically conniving, scheming individuals. And one of the things that's really interesting about QUEEK, that's actually a good place to start, is that we talked a bit last time that QUEEK is not a stupid Skaven. He's often thought of as being stupid by other Skaven because they assume he is, due to the fact that he does things like he leads from the front, which is seen as idiocy by most Skaven. Obviously, the safest place is at the back, but QUEEK doesn't care about safety. QUEEK is in some ways very much an adrenaline junkie. He is someone that he lives for fighting, and it is his happy place. When he is in the thick of a fight, especially if he's fighting someone that he views as a challenge, that is when he is at the peak of his joy. And those are the things like he fantasizes about when he's not in those moments where that's why he carries a trophy rack, is that he always likes to be reminded of when he's at his happiest, which is fighting worthy opponents. So for QUEEK, when you put him around a bunch of characters like Graciers, who are all about these convoluted, manipulative plans of far-reaching, power-grabbing schemes, QUEEK hates it. He hates it because he just sees it as basically a bunch of rambling, time-wasting nonsense that is getting between him and what he wants to do. Which has led him into a lot of these fights. Also, it doesn't help that the Graciers are one of the only groups with enough authority to tell him no. And QUEEK is a brat. He doesn't like being told no. He literally can't handle it. When people try to stop him from doing something, if he has the opportunity to kill that rat, he will kill them. He just will. He does not accept no's. Which is why it's usually a rather amusing scene whenever bad news has to be delivered to him. It's a whole thing among his various chieftains about who's going to pull the short stick and have to tell him the bad news, because they're probably going to die. More than likely. One of the things, though, that particularly I find interesting about QUEEK is that, so for Skavendom, we've talked about how that scheming is so core to their nature, and it's part of kind of like how we've talked about with High Elves, and how for them the politicking is like a sport they really enjoy, especially among the noble class. That's how Skaven are with manipulation. It's not just something that drives their culture, but it's something many of them genuinely enjoy. It is the bread and butter to how they thrive and survive. And QUEEK is seen as an idiot because he refuses to participate.
I'm just going to jump in there because I think you've made a very clear point that's worth reinforcing. Because you just said a phrase that I think perfectly encapsulates something that might make it easier for you to all understand politics and Skaven, and that's bread and butter. Now, we use that as a castaway phrase all the time, a quick idiom to say, you know, that's something that you all need. And in this case, it kind of is sustenance. We all like food, because the vast majority of us need it to survive, except for those few who are dying or for whatever reason have a drip or something similar, who are taking food in a different way. You need food to go. And because of that, our bodies are rewarded for eating it. We get pleasure from eating food. And our bodies, biological machines that they are, say, yeah, that thing that you need to survive, I'm going to make you enjoy it. You don't just have to take in sustenance. It's cool. It's awesome. You enjoy doing this. For the Skaven, the backbiting, politicking, backstabbing nonsense that they all do, they enjoy on a fundamental biological level. It's what drives them forward in the same way that eating food, that sex, that any of those other biological drives that you have work. Now, elves, the ephemeral craziness that they involve with their politics, the great mind games that they get drawn into, are similarly engaging to them in the same way that food is engaging to a human. Food is obviously engaging to elves and Skaven too, but it's something that biologically they are rewarded for because of the nature of their species. And it is hard-coded into them. Now, you might go, why? Old ones! The old ones made each of them to do something. Now, the Skaven are not an old one creation. They're a creation of a different entity. The Horned Rat is particularly the one that's blamed for this. So if you want to blame anyone, blame the Horned Rat.
Yeah. And QUEEK is insane because he doesn't feel that. The only pleasure he gets is from violence.
Yeah.
So with that understood, that's basically what happens to Karak Azul in a nutshell, was that there was and it's very strongly implied in the book that it would have worked. Like, it was a very well-crafted scheme that would have genuinely destroyed Karak Azul, but it fails because of Skaven. Most notably because of QUEEK. But QUEEK accomplishes his goal in kind of a sideways way. He pulls victory from the jaws of defeat, and that in his rampage, he ends up pushing Karak Azul to lay siege to Blackcrag, which means Karak Azul is now busy. So they're no longer going to be sending weapons out to other holds because now they're too busy assaulting one of the largest orc forts in the world. Go watch our Blackcrag Karak stream. It's a really cool place. So after this, QUEEK goes back to Karak 8 Peaks. And this really sets us up for the end times. This is like the year leading up to the end times, where while QUEEK is running around and he's absent, he ends up missing, which is genuinely something that pisses him off in the end times and is so funny. Belegar gets a novella called Thorgrim. And it's quite literally about Thorgrim Grudge Bearer, the High King of the Dwarfs himself, goes to Karak 8 Peaks for the first time in a long time. And he goes there to deal with Belegar because Belegar owes him a whole bunch of money. And Thorgrim comes to bring him to task. And during this, Karak 8 Peaks is attacked by Gorfang Rotgut, who has been chased out of Blackcrag by the dwarfs of Karak Azul. So you can see how QUEEK has literally kickstarted all of this avalanche of events. But QUEEK isn't in Karak 8 Peaks. We'll get to where he is in a second. So he misses not only a chance to fight Thorgrim Grudgebearer, who's in Karak 8 Peaks, the big bad, the big white beard thing of the dwarfs himself on his big golden throne, but he also misses the chance to have his revenge against Gorfang because Gorfang beat him in a fight, which is awesome. And Gorfang gets killed through a series of all sorts of events. Gorfang, I will say, Thorgrim, if you've never read that novella, it's very short. It's fucking amazing. I think it's an S tier book novella. It's very, like I said, it's very short. Gorfang is treated with so much respect. He is so hard to kill. But he does eventually get taken down. And this is huge. Like, I remember when 8th edition came out, this was such a big fucking deal that Thorgrim, thanks to a series of events involving Belegar and some other stuff, and Gorfang also refusing Skarsnik's help because he's fucking Gorfang and he wants no help from no stinking goblin. one of the most famous orc characters is killed, which honestly was kind of a big like, oh shit, the narrative's moving. What the fuck?
Yep.
The narrative's moving. What's happening?
And for those of you who don't know, Warhammer was noted for never really moving its narrative. For all it occasionally added its big summer events, which did move their narratives. They always retconned them. And for all they took some characters and took them down different lines, and I'm thinking largely our Grim Warden of Torri of Res for that one, in particular, Eltharion the Grim. Typically, Warhammer just sat there, treading water, never really moving anywhere. The story didn't shift. And outside of its summer campaigns where they went, and suddenly it's 2550 and Karl Franz, Nemesis Crown and stuff. Outside of those, nothing ever changed. And this was at the opening of a new era saying, yeah, change is coming. And that was quite fun. It was a really interesting step. It was similar to the event where Marius Lightdorf just randomly got killed off in a small story, which I wasn't so keen about because it was a tiny story to kill such a cool character.
Yeah. So where was QUEEK? Why wasn't he in this epic saga where he obviously should have been? He would have heard about everything that was banging on upstairs. And we get our answer to this in the end times, which is that QUEEK, after everything that went down at Carrick Azul, is summoned back to Skaven Blight. Which he has not been to in a really long time. Basically,
he's 4 years old.
Yeah. Well, so by this point he is 7. Or no, I want to. Yeah, I think he's 5.
I think he's only about 5 or 6 at this point.
Yeah, he's like 5. He's like 5.
And he's not been back for about 4 years, which is his entire life.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So QUEEK gets called home to Skaven Blight by Grand Warlord Nodwell. And Nodwell basically calls him home to tell him about what the Skaven are about to do, which is an event that's known as the Great Uprising in the End Times, which is technically part of the End Times, but it's also technically kind of the setup to the End Times.
Yeah.
Which is that basically the Council of 13 have decided the time to move is now because they have a lot of prophets and Grey Seers and all this stuff, and they know that something's shaking and moving. They can sense that something's about to go down. A new Ever-Chosen is on the move, and they can kind of tell. So Nodwell basically tells QUEEK that all of this is happening, and he starts to point out to QUEEK that while QUEEK is on the top of the world at the moment, ultimately, he's 5 years old. It's not going to be that long before he's going to start to get gray hairs. I think he literally pulls like a single gray hair off of QUEEK's body and basically starts giving this whole monologue about how QUEEK is going to start to get old. He's going to start getting slower. His vision's going to get worse, and he's going to die. And this unsettles QUEEK quite a bit because QUEEK is not a figure that tends to think about mortality very much, especially in regards to himself. QUEEK is definitely possessed of a god complex where he often very much is under the assumption that he is immortal and just cannot die most of the time. And so when Nodwell not only points out that he's getting older, but Nodwell threatens him in a number of ways that puts QUEEK in his place in a way that makes QUEEK profoundly uncomfortable. Where Nodwell is basically flexing his own strength and power to remind QUEEK that, yeah, you're a big deal where in like Carrick 8 Peaks and among Skavendom, but compared to me, you are nothing. Like,
and I think I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and I think there's an important component of understanding the relationship between Nodwell and QUEEK. QUEEK has very big boots and can appear to be an extraordinary, powerful character. But Nodwell raised him, knows him, understands him on a fundamental level, and basically brings him up and doesn't take him to task, doesn't say you suck or do anything else. It basically attacks him at his weakest point because he knows him. He has almost bred him for this, and he completely understands who QUEEK is. And he basically says, hey, QUEEK, you know that thing you really fear? No, I don't fear anything. You're wrong. And I'm about to tell you what you fear. Old age. Squeak.
Yeah. And this is also where Nodwell does the genius move, because once again, he knows his adoptive son. And he basically goes, look at me, QUEEK. I'm over 200 years old. Look how strong I am. you could be like me. But in order to do this, you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because I'm about to tell you a scheme, and I know you don't give a shit about schemes, but it's time for you to grow up and give a shit. Like, it's a very good writing between these two characters, especially because QUEEK is so profoundly uncomfortable the entire time. So with that, QUEEK is basically told, you need to go home to Carrick 8 Peaks, and I'm going to spend a ludicrous amount of warp tokens, and I'm going to call in every favor we have, because it's time to end the war. It's time. The greenskins, the dwarfs, you need to show that Clan Moors is the strongest clan, which means this war needs to end now. Not next year, not in 3 years, now. Mm-hmm. And to QUEEK, it's kind of an interesting thing, because QUEEK, being so driven by battle, is amusingly enough shown to have a bit of a personal dilemma, like almost his equivalent of a moral dilemma. Because for QUEEK, an endless battle is not a bad thing. For him, and just fighting endlessly is joy. He loves Carrick 8 Peaks. The idea of bringing it to an end for QUEEK is uncomfortable. But this is enough of an incentive, and he realizes that he can't just, at least right now, because he's still QUEEK, he's still thinking about trying to kill Nodwell, but doesn't, because there's a part of him that goes, no, something's wrong with this guy. If I try and jump him, he's going to kill me. Like he has a hard time admitting it, but he's scared of Nodwell. Which the only other thing QUEEK has ever been canonically scared of is the greater demon of Khorne, being Scarbrand. You know, understandably.
It's greater demon.
No. So QUEEK goes back to Carrick 8 Peaks, and this leads into the events of the end time. So we have the Great Uprising, where like Talea and Astalia are completely flooded and overwhelmed by rats. Skaven attack all over the world, in Bretonnia, the Empire, the Dwarf Holds and stuff. And initially, the attack goes really, really well, particularly in the Southern Realms. But then the Skaven do what they always do, which is that they start infighting. They start like having spats over spoils. They start getting comfortable, thinking that they've got the advantage. This is exactly what screwed them over in the Black Plague Wars, and it's what screwed them over in the Red Pox Wars in Bretonnia, is that the Skaven start off really strong, and then they peter out because they start infighting and squabbling over spoils, and they end up defeating themselves.
Every time.
And,
it's great.
And QUEEK down in Carrick 8 Peaks is mostly left out of this until the uprising triggers an event, which is that Seer Lord Kritislik, who is the big bad of the Council of 13, the big bad of the Greyseers, he's the head of the Greyseer clan in a very old Greyseer. He realizes that the Skaven are losing momentum. And so he attempts to do a ritual to basically force the Skaven back under his heel, because he goes, I have the master plan. I'm going to do the cool, the smart thing. Everyone does what I tell them to, because I speak with the authority of the Great Horned Rat. And he shouldn't have said that. He shouldn't have said that, because he invokes God, basically, and God says, no. And so the Great Horned Rat, for the first time in 200 years since the big ritual at the end of the Great War Against Chaos, manifests in Skaven Blight. And he manifests, and he just obliterates Seer Lord Kritislik for basically lying. Because Seer Lord Kritislik wasn't actually trying to bring about the end of the world. He was just furthering his own schemes and power. And the Great Horned Rat says, no, enough is enough. This is the end of days. If I'm going to make a power play, if I'm going to ascend, it must be now. You, my children, need to stop fucking wasting my time. And the rest of the Council of 13 goes,
okay.
And they vote to kick the Greyseers out of the Council of 13. And because there's no Greyseer representatives, because Kritislik just got murdered in front of all of them, it passes basically unanimously. So this sets off a huge set of dominoes, because meanwhile, once again, this is all relevant to QUEEK. We get taken to the realm of ruin, which is the Great Horned Rat's domain, where all of his demons and horrible things are, where we meet the real Council of 13, known as the Shadow Council, where instead of it being 12 rats, it's 12 vermin lords, which are the greater demons / demon princes of the Great Horned Rat, who are having their own discussion. And they're basically looking at what just happened and going, oh shit. And they all start making their own maneuvers, because since the end times has arrived and chaos is an ascendant, the veil between reality and the ether is really thin, and it's starting to tear in places.
Yeah, let's make this as clear as we can, because this is something that's a little bit confusing for people who might not know Warhammer very well. Loosely speaking, in Warhammer, we have the real world, the mortal realms, if you want to use more modern parlance, and we have the realm of chaos, or the aether. It's called different names in different books. The realm of the gods, or indeed any of the other realms, for a parallel dimension that sits on the other side of reality. And here is a place where time doesn't flow in the same way as it does over in the mortal realms. This is a place where everything is in flux, because it's a realm of emotion. It is the realm of chaos. It's the realm of dreams. It's the realm of demons. And inside this realm, which is infinite in size, in the same way you could argue that the mortal realms is infinite in its own way, and we're only dealing with a single planet, that is infinite in size. Each one of the gods has its own realm, its own area that it controls. It's not the mortal realms, where all the mortals are sitting in the physical world. It's the divine realms. And the realm of ruin is one of these realms. You've got a realm for Khorne. You've got a realm almost certainly for Sigmar, for Mor, the god of death, for all manner of deities and gods sitting on the other side. And the realm of ruin is where the Horned Rat rules, with his realm of ruin council of 13 greater demons of the Horned Rat. And it is worth making clear what Ryan was suggesting there. Greater demon / demon prince, because most of, if not perhaps all of, the greater demons of the Horned Rat were once mortal and were elevated into that position in exactly the same way that the Chaos Gods elevate their demon princes. Now you might go, does that just make him a Chaos God? Well, no, because all of the gods do this. All of them, to a greater or lesser degree. There are all manner of divine servants for the other gods as well. They're often classed as saints or some equivalent, where they might come back. And they're not necessarily bewinged freaks who can take down, I don't know, cities with a fell swoop. They manifest in different ways, but all of the gods have got their divine servant equivalent. And the greater demons of the Horned Rat, demon princes of the Horned Rat, if you prefer, or just the greater divine servants of the Horned Rat, have their own council, which lead effectively in a demonic hierarchy all of the demonic realm of ruin side of things, where they are hopefully attempting to do whatever plan it is for their great inheritance over on the mortal realm side.
Yeah, and most of the time, they, like throughout most of the Warhammer world's history, they can only influence things subtly. So maybe like whispering to certain Skaven in their dreams, or trying to move events in a very careful way. But other times, they, a Grey Seer will pull off a big enough ritual that one of them can manifest temporarily into real space and like do stuff.
And one of the reasons that the end times is important is because magic in the world has begun to seep massively out of the gates at the North and the South Pole. And through doing that, the veil, the line, the splitting part between the mortal realms and the divine realms begins to thin, allowing demons to manifest in lots of places where normally they simply couldn't. And sometimes when the magic fluxes to an extraordinary height, demons can manifest without any interaction at all from the material side. So they can literally just walk out into an area that they wish to influence and do shit. Where normally demons, when they enter the mortal plane, are exceedingly short-lived. They can't last for very long at all. And they need areas of high magic to sustain themselves for more than just a few seconds or maybe even an hour or so. They don't last long. The great Warhammer battles where demons are stalking around on the battlefields only happen during great end-time events. They're not common. It requires something magical, something extraordinary for lots of demons to be in one place at one time. It's why the Cataclysm is a unique event, because there's demons all over the world manifesting freely. It's why the Vortex is so important, the great vortex of magic that's over Ulthuan that pulls all the magic from the world, because it stops demons manifesting freely wherever they are. And every so many years, a great event occurs, which is often referred to as end times. It's when an Everchosen starts riding as they attempt to destroy the world, because there's so much more magic in the world that the vortex isn't powerful enough to suck it out in time, allowing demons to manifest in unexpected areas. And for an entity like the Horned Rat, this is good, because now its secret Council of 13, the demonic council on the other side, can start enacting its plan in the mortal realms directly, rather than whispering through to mortal servants, often the magically alert Skaven, which become the Grey Seers mostly. So the Grey Seers, warlock engineers along that they can whisper to demons because they're closer to magic. So the demons can whisper to them. It's one of the reasons why the Grey Seers are so important. But they're somewhat less important come the end times, because the demons themselves can just manifest and talk to any Skaven.
Yep. And case in point is that after the Vermin Lords all run away to go do all their schemes. And one of them decides, because all the Vermin Lords, despite the fact they're technically in the grand scheme working towards the same goal, they're still Skaven entities at the end of the day. And they are backstabbing one another and trying to move up in their hierarchy on the council. And one of them is what's known as a Vermin Lord Deceiver by the name of Lurklocks. And Vermin Lord Deceivers, you can kind of think of it as like if you took like a Clan Eshin Skaven and made them into a greater demon or a demon prince. That's essentially what a Vermin Lord Deceiver is. It's a big like ninja, like think of like a kaiju-sized ninja rat. And Lurklocks, who is very, very powerful on the Shadow Council of 13, like he is in like the top 3 biggest, baddest Skaven. Lurklocks decides to go put his weight behind QUEEK. He thinks QUEEK is going to be key to the success that he hopes to achieve in the end times. So he manifests within Carrick 8 Peaks in a very cool scene where QUEEK essentially faces down with a demon prince of the Great Horned Rat, which for most Skaven would be like heart attack inducing or instant death. QUEEK, to his credit, actually senses that Lurklocks is there immediately because of his skulls, which is one of the coolest moments of their meeting, which is that Lurklocks, being a deceiver, is basically invisible. Like, if he does not want you to know he's there, you don't know he's there because he's just a living shadow, despite his size. But QUEEK, who always has his skulls like talking, when Lurklocks manifests near him, the skulls go completely silent. Like they all shut up as if they're terrified, despite being dead spirits seemingly bound to QUEEK. And the moment they go quiet, QUEEK goes, "Oh, something's wrong. Something's very wrong." And QUEEK figures out where Lurklocks is and attacks him because he's fucking QUEEK Headtaker. He senses a demon that is huge and he goes, "I'm gonna fuck it up." And Lurklocks goes, "Oh, how cute. What a fun toy you are." And it becomes clear very quickly to QUEEK that if he tries to fight Lurklocks, it's probably going to go very poorly for him. He might win, but odds are he will not. And Lurklocks reveals that he is not there to kill QUEEK, but he is there to advise him. And that he is going to throw his weight behind QUEEK because he thinks that QUEEK is the secret to the Skaven's ascendancy. And what he leaves out is his own ascendancy for the end times. And one of the things that's actually quite funny about the whole thing is that QUEEK immediately hates Lurklocks. Immediately hates him.
I mean, it's QUEEK.
Yeah, because
so surprised.
Queek goes, oh, he's a fucking schemer. Like, he's just like the Grey Seers. He's just like the Clan Eshin rats. And Queek hates Clan Eshin because they've tried to kill him so much, but they are the ultimate, sneak backstabbers, which Queek despises. That's not a form of combat that he has any appreciation for. He sees it as cowardly. So he's willing to rely on Lurklocks only because he knows he can't really kill Lurklocks. But Queek does not enjoy this partnership at all. Where most Skaven would be like, oh, there's a Vermin Lord supporting me. Ooh. But it turns out this is very important. And we're going to get back to Super Chats here because I'm going to leave us out on a note, which is that turns out it's not the only Vermin Lord in Carrick 8 Peaks. Because there's another one by the name of Soothgnawer. And Soothgnawer is a Vermin Lord Warp Seer, I think they're called, which are the kind of Grey Seer looking ones.
Yeah, the Grey Seers.
Yeah. And it is backing up a Grey Seer that arrives in Carrick 8 Peaks by the name of Cranscript. And Cranscript is basically one of the still has enough authority and power within Skavendom to show up with a giant army from Skaven Blight and say, hey, I've been assigned as your second in command. And Queek goes, oh, fucking kill me. And Cranscript's apparently making genius political moves because he's got a fucking Vermin Lord telling him what to do. And that, I think, is a good moment to get back into some Super Chats.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Ian Dudo honestly would love a story where Queek gets the skull of a necromancer talking to him that he doesn't realize is possessed, but still helpful for him. So I'm actually going to raise this up a level where I think if you wanted to do Queek justice and have a cool short story where you have this as a theme, I think the thing that would be fun would be having a necromancer who talks through the skulls to try and manipulate Queek into doing what he wants Queek to do. But at the end of the story, Queek reveals that the skulls have been telling him things that the necromancer hasn't. And Queek knows when the necromancer's talking and when the actual skulls themselves are talking, which leads to him like betraying the necromancer.
Yeah, no notes. I agree. It's funny because I spotted this comment and I was thinking exactly the same thing. You saved me having to come up with an answer.
Yeah, there you go.
I agree.
Holy Artist, when will the cheers work? Soon in the new year.
Yeah, we're having some difficulty organizing not just Twitch, but bloody YouTube and its monetization connecting through properly as well. So as soon as it's fixed, you will be the first to know. We want it fixed now. But there is, let's say, some difficulties because of the UK-US divide. And the fact that what used to be easy business practices are now very hard. And that America is no longer easy to do business with. So, loosely speaking, that's what we're currently jumping through hoops to resolve.
Yep, and we're close. It feels like we've been close for 3
bloody
months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be easy. It is not easy.
Yeah. Krustu, how much money to get the Lizardman City to the top of the next tier list? So
the next list, as in we're doing the finishing off of the last Lizardman City that we created. If it's that, quite a bit, because there's something I want to do for it, and I am currently booked up with my free time, until sometime near the end of January. So it won't be coming. I'm the issue here. This is 100% me as an issue. And I have a lot of jobs on right now, one of which I'm enjoying so much that even if I had free time, I would probably be spending my time doing that job anyway. So I'm the issue. If I haven't made a comment about it come the end of January, that's when you bug me, because by that time, all of the jobs that are on my slate should have dropped back a little bit back to my normal situation.
No, it is on our to-do list. It's genuine.
It is.
Every once in a while, I'll be like, "You want to do it?"
I'm the problem here. This is 100% not Ryan. It's me.
Yep. John the King, hope everyone had an amazing Christmas and I'm loving the new wallpaper of Nakai. Awesome. I hope y'all enjoyed that. For anyone that hasn't seen it, over on the Loremaster of Sotek channel and in the Discords, I worked with an artist from the Lorebeards community, David, who's awesome, to make what I thought, based on the lore that's written about them, what I would kind of lean on to, what I imagined Crocsgores to look like. And we even made a Nakai version where we went really hard into his golden trinkets. And instead of it just being like random doodads that are on his body, we made it where like Nakai has been so wounded over millennia that the gold is used almost like a form of like stitching and sutures. So he's got like golden plates that have held parts of his body together while he healed. And it turned out really, really well. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And there's a wallpaper version that you can have for free if you'd like. So,
what channel did you post it in?
On the Lorebeards channel, it was posted in server news, and in the Lorebeards.
Yeah, I missed that entirely.
Yeah, and on the
in server news. Okay, cool.
I didn't know where I like. It's like I guess I could have put it in Lorebeards news, but I was like,
there it is. Yeah, there it is. Nice.
Yeah. But it turned out super well, and I also put up a video on the Loremaster of Sotek channel that has the time lapse of him drawing it and all like the different versions we made. So if any of that sounds of interest to you, please check it out. It's free and available for y'all. It's just like a little gift from me to y'all.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Necro player, how much or how little do we know about the other playable Skaven Lords table or computer? How do you think QUEEK would get along with them, or vice versa? So QUEEK is QUEEK, if you're talking about like how much how much of their life we know, QUEEK takes it by a country mile. Because his life is so short. Like Thankful and Ikit Claw, we actually know a lot about, but there are gaps. There are still vague mysteries, especially about their early lives. Whereas QUEEK, we know literally fucking everything. QUEEK is definitely the character we know the most about, followed probably by like Thankful, then Ikit Claw, then Throt the Unclean, then probably Tretch Craventail, Squeal Gnawtooth. The most mysterious characters by far are Lord Skrulk and Deathmaster Snitch. They're relatively mysterious. Like not a lot of their background is really delved into. How does QUEEK get along with them? He doesn't. QUEEK doesn't get along with anybody. Like the closest character he gets along with is Ska Bloodtail, his lieutenant, and QUEEK threatens to kill him constantly. QUEEK does not get along with anybody. Thomas, hey, thank you for all the content. I've been following for a long time. I finally got Dark Deeds for Christmas, and I'm excited to play the holidays. Excellent. Thank you so much.
I hope it goes well. And for all of you who haven't bought Dark Deeds, what have you been doing with yourselves these last few months? Go buy Dark Deeds. You can get it right now from Modifius.com or Modifius.co.uk.
Yep. Joe, Sotek, we're trying to reach you about your extended warranty. I don't get those calls as much. Nowadays, I keep getting calls from people asking if I'm willing to sell my house, which, no. First of all, I don't own it. My parents do. Second of all, no. Third of all, no. Getting Gleeful, a TV show recommendation, though disclaimer based on real life events, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. It's really well acted.
Not watching it.
Duly noted. Joe Miller, also, do you think greenskins could access the winds of magic? I love the idea of a hobgoblin shaman using Hish. So,
controversial.
If you're dealing with Warhammer Fantasy, almost the universe, almost is key here. The universal answer is no. Greenskins cannot use regular magic. Except when they do, which is rare, but it does happen. Usually due to an artifact. So like Azhag uses death magic and even necromancy because of the Crown of Nagash, but you could argue it's not actually him doing it. It's just the Crown doing it, using him as a conduit. But it's still technically him casting the spells. It's very rare, but it's theoretically possible. But GW has been very kind of like about how greenskin magic relates to regular magic because they're not the same thing. They're
And
not.
and particularly when you look at, say, Age of Sigmar, where they're desperate to make everything one of the 8 winds of magic, you end up with very different answers. So, loosely speaking, no.
Yeah.
But
In
yeah,
Age of
sure.
Sigmar, the answer is yes, but in fantasy, the answer is no.
Yeah, completely. And if the answer in Age of Sigmar is yes, then the answer in Warhammer should probably be yes, which means we've got a complicated setup here. And the answer is
yeah. Joe Miller, also awesome. Sotek, what do you think of a Gorger getting a vision or a gut feeling from the Maw leading to a half-feral butcher? Already asked Andy. Thanks for that, by the way. Yeah, I'd say that's totally doable. That's super easy. Fairly an inconvenience. I mean, if you look at the lore of Scrag the Slaughterer, there are notes about how the Gorgers like naturally follow him on some instinctive level, even traveling underground, following him as he wanders around the world. And he's able to call them to him through ways that almost come off as supernatural, and it's very heavily implied to be the Maw influencing them. So I would say this is basically already kind of written in.
Yeah, I like that.
Gideon Gleeful, your comparison with the mantle is interesting, as my fan theory is that that pre-old ones, the core of the planet was the main connection to the ether.
It's certainly a theory you could go with, particularly when you look at what the Warhammer world as a whole becomes on the Malice side, over on the Age of Sigmar. And that core is something that matters. So definitely something that you could run with ease.
Yeah, because according to Age of Sigmar, the Warhammer Fantasy World's core, like the metal core, is one of the most powerful magics in existence. Like, it's obscenely powerful.
And if we then tie that back to the Warhammer world and where it currently is, it does suggest that the core of the planet itself is something that is obscenely magical. So the answer is already sort of there. So it's not really a fan theory per se. It's more of an extrapolation of the existing facts that we have from both Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar.
Singemeister, making a skill mod for Sail, Mammoth and Kurgan aside, what unit should he buff? For Sail, you'd want to lean into what? Kurgan Horsemen. I would also do like Marauders with throwing weapons, because the Dolgan tribe were noted to be like incredibly skilled archers and range marksmen by Kurgan standards. Mammoths, probably Chaos Spawn. And yeah, probably call it there. I think it'd be fine.
Can't say I know Total War well enough to give an informed answer there.
Gideon Gleeful, are there any stories from someone in the Empire being in another country and them openly discussing the Skaven and being awkward or confused? Yeah, read the Bruno the Bounty Hunter series.
Yeah.
That's probably the best example. Also, the Blackhearts. The Blackhearts tackles this vaguely. It's not the exact same thing, because they're like in an offshoot kind of podunk part of the Empire, but you will have lots of stories where the Skaven get brought up, and there will be people from other countries that are like, oh yeah, Skaven, and the Empire people are like, what? And it's a thing.
It's one of the reasons why the answer that was dropped into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where there's a great grey magic ritual in place making the Skaven not be understood, sort of falls apart. It's because they're understood all over the place. It's quite clear that a lot of the Skaven being a myth aspect of their story is something that they themselves have reinforced, rather than magic has made it a universal certainty. So loosely, yeah, this is something that happens. There's individuals who know about Skaven all over the place, and in some parts of the old world, they're very well known, particularly when you look at, say, the Dawi and what they're doing up in the World's Edge Mountains, which are parts of the old world, obviously. And they're connected directly to the Empire. It's clearly not simply a geological issue. So, for example, where I am geographically speaking means that I can or cannot know about Skaven in the long term, because tons of folk actually do. So if you want to make a magical answer for this, I'd be wary.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those ones where it definitely works much better as a cultural thing, as opposed to a magical thing.
And the idea that Skaven are just lumped in with beastmen is not that extraordinary for an ignorant, not very well educated populace. It makes sense. The beastmen are a known component in the forests of the Empire. The Skaven are a relatively unknown component and underneath the cities of the Empire. And everybody knows about beastmen, and Skaven don't look that much different. It's not a great stretch to go that the Skaven aren't real, particularly when the Skaven themselves are strongly supporting this view because they don't want any uprisings against them or any attempts to delve down deep and hopefully face and stop their various schemes. So I think it makes absolute sense. It's not as daft as many try to make it out, but in some parts of the old world, it is absolutely daft because the Skaven are constantly there being a pressure against them. But in the official sources we have, no one there thinks Skaven don't exist. There's just this attempt to try and fix the why are Skaven not known thing at various points in Warhammer's history that have left it with some relatively odd answers, like it's a great ritual the Grey Seers have put in place.
Yeah, because like when you read like Black Library novels, you'll find that anytime there's a Talayan character, they always know what the Skaven are. Always.
Pretty much.
But in the wider lore, they're like, oh, they're not known by mankind. It's like, by mankind, I think you just mean the Empire, but sure.
Yeah, and they do generally just mean the Empire because mankind is often conflated with the Empire in a really silly way. Because there are so many different realms that have humanity at its heart. Whether the more chaos-leaning ones up north, whether the more Cathayan ones over in the east, or Nipponese, or the Indish, or if we move over to Araby, or Tilia, or Bretonia, or Estalia. There's so many human realms, but often the writers are writing purely from the perspective of the Empire, and it leaves with a super skewed vision as to exactly what the Skaven are.
Joe Miller, stream thoughts. Build a Skaven clan. Oh yeah, we'll definitely do that at some point. Or
I think that's a must.
Yeah, or what if the Empire invested into necromancy as another college? Okay, I'm done, I promise. So we have a stream coming up on not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, where we're going to be discussing what if Marathi had founded the Colleges of Magic, which is very exciting. That one has a lot of really cool, easy things.
I am so looking forward to that stream, by the way. So if you want to see me getting giddy like a child, watch that one. I think that will be super interesting, and necromancy would be a core component of that. But I think it's also worth noting that necromancy is a part of the Colleges of Magic as it stands. It's just a different form of it because they've got the Amethyst College. And you've got to remember that the necromantic view, what necromancers were before the Colleges of Magic, is not what necromancers are after the Colleges of Magic, because many of them are thanatologists, as in they are people who are using the magic of death. And we have that in the old world where we have necromancers who are not necessarily bad guys, but after the Colleges of Magic, necromancy becomes basically just Nagash lore. But before then, it kind of isn't. It's a far broader lore of magic. And the colleges do cover most of it.
Yeah, something that a lot of people don't necessarily realize is if you're ever dealing with Warhammer stuff, it's not, for the vampire counts, it's not called the lore of necromancy. It's called the lore of vampires. Which is even in and of itself is a bit of a silly name for it.
It really is.
Necromancy is a much broader term than it really is one of those terms that should have notable subdivisions within the setting. So like within the setting, using the term necromancer would probably be, there would probably be more nuance to it and more specified terms, because there's forms of necromancy that are considered legal and there are forms of necromancy that are not considered legal. And it's a mess.
And does it use black magic? Dar, the answer is yes, then it's bad and it's illegal. And almost everything Nagash did involved that. Because he was no way going to avoid all the benefits that Warpstone and black magic could offer him. So Nagash's form of necromancy is the freaking worst and is deeply illegal. But necromancy as a whole is a far broader subject. And it's caused Warhammer writers extreme difficulties. They attempt to backflip and make the Amethyst College make sense and not be necromancy, while simultaneously saying it's death magic. Well, isn't that necromancy? Isn't that what necromancy means? No, necromancy is its own thing. As they very poorly attempt to explain the differences between them.
Yeah, that being said, it is very understandable that in universe people would conflate them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that
all
makes
necromancy
sense.
is bad necromancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that great war against chaos, necromancers as a whole are pulled in by Magnus the Pious and taught how to use magic by Teclis and his crew. These are necromancers as we understand them at the time. They are part of the foundation of the colleges of magic. So if you are out there going, well, no necromancy in the Empire. No, necromancers are at the very founding of what the colleges of magic are. It's just what you're calling a necromancer isn't necessarily what was there at the beginning.
Yeah. How would Wild from Berserk fare if he met QUEEK? Would they like each other / fight? How far would Guts, no Berserk armor, get in terms of fighting in Warhammer? Okay, I don't know who Wild is off the top of my head, but I do know who Guts is. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase and say, if you ever ask the question, would QUEEK get along with X? The answer is no. QUEEK only likes people that are dead. That he has killed, and he has their skulls, and their skulls say nice things to him. Those are the only people he likes. Other than that, he wants to kill people. That's just the way he is. As for how would Guts do without army, he's an anime character, so he'd probably do better than he has any right to. But
yeah, anime characters are mental. Manga in general is mental. Even when it's not, they all move at the speed of plot, but QUEEK to a degree does as well. And it's worth noting that QUEEK in the novels and how he's expressed there is significantly more capable than he is in the tabletop Warhammer
he doesn't
side.
Have the armor to keep him alive, because I know the armor is like absolutely batshit. If he was even remotely human, like he had human capabilities, QUEEK is going to kill him.
Yeah.
Because QUEEK is just so fast that a human has to be obscene. And
I'm not so convinced with Berserk.
Yeah, like if your claim to fame is you wield a giant, like I think his sword is literally described as a slab of iron that no human has it's strong, but it's slow. That's the worst weapon to have against QUEEK. Literally.
Yeah. I think it would end up being a QUEEK runs away job.
Yeah.
Not capable of killing him, so just runs off before he gets hit. And if he gets hit, he's dead. A classic QUEEK situation.
Rohay, take more money, more shiny gift prime. Update Spotify thing more. I have been updating it. Squeak, no excuse, lie, Sotek me. Thank you. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I have been updating it. I've got another 12 episodes that are just waiting for me to expect those a lot over the coming days, because I've been uploading a ton. So I've uploaded all of the missing episodes from before we moved purely to the Lorebeards channel, and I'm now starting to get those uploaded. So those are coming out.
Sweet.
Crosto, Andy lost the Lizardman City map.
Yeah, that's what happened. Genuinely, what happened. It's quite embarrassing. It's worse. It's actually worse. I didn't lose the file. I saved over it. Genuinely worse. When I went back in.
Boo this man!
When I went back in to resolve the file, I found it a flattened tiny mess, which had been used for a thumbnail. And I looked at it and went, where would the map go? Oh no. And I haven't done that for I don't know how long. It was such a rookie error. Hilariously bad outcome. But yeah, I screwed up.
Yeah, we do have the notes from that first stream. Yeah, so it's just a matter of we just gotta make time for it. Told Horus Heresy, Stephen Lucas says, I was told the Horus Heresy was originally supposed to only be 10-ish books, but it got popular, which is why Horus fell so fast considering the length of the series. Also, 8 not shit tanks justifies why mine always explode round 1. I don't know what the
steam tanks explode.
Oh, steam tanks.
I presume, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that. So, Stephen, I'm not entirely convinced with what you're attempting to say there. Horus Heresy planned to be smaller, yes. Ended up being bigger because it's enormously popular, equally, yes. And that's okay. That's good. You could argue that the end times are somewhat similar in that they were planned to be much bigger because of the Horus Heresy and ended up being much smaller because of the reality of what they wanted to do with Age of Sigmar. Do I wish it had been different? Yes. Do I wish that we had, say, for example, a 9th edition of Warhammer to conclude it all? And with each faction being released, progressing that story on until eventually we end up with the Warriors of Chaos being released as the last faction, and the story of Archaon blowing up the world, as possibly our 13th army list to really tie it back to, say, Abaddon or something ridiculous like that. With lots of side novels working along throughout that edition, a good 4 or 5 year turnaround to finish Warhammer, sure, I would have loved that. But we didn't get that. What we got instead was our 5-book, 10-book arguably, but 5-book release, which focused on some very specific areas inside the old world and very little for the rest of the world. Some extra novels on top, many of which were pretty brief in terms of the rest of the world as well, and a whole bunch of really crazy takes dropped in and some weird setups and letdowns.
Yeah. So he's talking about how by the time of, so there were only 12 good steam tanks and the rest were garbage that explode on.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense.
All right, Super Orlock, thank you for the
appreciated. Thank you.
The cat face, appreciate it. Getting gleeful. To be honest, I understand the love of backstabbing. It's like when you play the card that gives another player a nemesis you can't kill in Dark Deeds. That is fun. Yes, yeah, it is a good feeling. It's an understandable. It's a feeling I can empathize with the Skaven.
Yeah, plus play Dark Deeds, so you can understand too. But yes, and this aspect of the Skaven is dialed up for them. So where humanity, us, we have a somewhat selfish gene, to quote Richard Dawkins, and we do sometimes get a bit of a kick out of getting one over someone else. And it's a part of innate human psychology where sometimes when we further our own goals, we get a bit of a kick. For the Skaven, they get a big kick. They get a real kick out of it. They're like, yes, I've got it. And you can see this for every Skaven. QUEEK has this too. He gets his kick most for when he literally kills someone. He's got that kick hard-coded into him. But most Skaven don't have the physical might that he has, so they don't express it that way. They do it by generally manipulating, backstabbing, and getting someone else to take the fall for whenever something goes wrong. But it is a core component of what the Skaven are. And whenever you're creating them, thinking of stories for them, always have running at the back of your head that they are going to get more out of it if they've got one over everyone else. It doesn't even need to be an opponent. It can be a friend. It can be an ally. It can be anyone. If they get something more out of the situation, they're always going to be happier, which means that at the core decision-making process, every single time, they're making a decision which says, but could I get more? Can I get more out of this? Which means that they're constantly on a push your luck situation. They're constantly rolling the dice in the hope that they can get more, and they're constantly also failing because they're constantly going far further than any other species would in the hope that they will reign supreme. And that ultimately means that you end up with some figures who have rolled the dice and succeeded. And they're the ones that the Horned Rat blesses. In many respects, the Horned Rat's almost like a god of luck, the one who's most lucky, the one who has got the most out of it all, the situation that's directly in front of them, the one who comes up with their D6 or their die, to go right back to the beginning of the stream, and rolled it 12 times in a row and got a 6. Because the one that didn't and backed out and didn't attempt to roll the dice is the one that the Horned Rat will go, yeah, well, who even are you? Because that guy over there, he's the one that's come out, and I bless. So yeah, there's a nice little bit there. They're degenerate gamblers. They kind of are.
Yeah, basically. Nodwell, listen very carefully. I will only say this once. This is a reference to a very old.
Hello. Listen very carefully. I will say this only once. A reference to Hello, which was a BBC comedy from the 80s.
Huh, there you go. Darius Rose, hope you had a great holiday. So far, I'm painting the new Marauder Army / Terminator box that I got for Christmas. Awesome. Also, a gremlin from the Gremlins movies versus a goblin. Honestly, okay, you want to talk about two things that would probably get along and it would be very unfortunate for everyone else? It would probably be this. Gremlins are awful little bastards.
Greenskin's got on with anything that's green. and surprisingly well. Yeah, they fight a bit of whatever. Gremlins are sort of green or black or yellow or whatever else they happen to be. Yeah, they'd probably be fine.
Yeah, I would honestly, it would probably be much more unfortunate for whoever happened to be in the vicinity, because they have a very sadistic. Both of those have a very sadistic and cruel sense of humor.
Yeah. Plus, the gremlins are often moving almost at the speed of plot rather than necessarily because they have stats of a particular type. Yeah, that's better.
Gideon, does the Great Horned Rat have demons apart from Verminlords? Yes. The ones that we know about for sure are the literal swarms of rat demons. They look kind of like normal rats, but they're endless and they're horrible and they can eat through literally anything. But there are implied to be other nameless horrors and things that people who have witnessed them have either gone mad or didn't survive the experience have witnessed that could be birthed out of the realm of ruin.
Yeah, the realm of ruin is full of stuff. And a lot of that, when it manifests into the mortal realms, appears as rats. There's an example of this in Lawhammer where we have a greater demon of the horned rat popping up, and there's freaking rats everywhere. And I do mean everywhere. They're like wading like 6-7 foot more deep. And we even have Gotrek and Felix wading their way through that good times in Lawhammer. There is a question, though, as to what else is there. And when the army list came out for the 4th edition of Warhammer, that's a Skaven army list, and it included for the very first time a Verminlord, which was marked as a greater demon. The immediate theory crafting came up because in Warhammer at that time, there was very clear differentiations between different types of demons. You had greater demons, you had lesser demons, you had steeds, and you had beasts. There was 4 types of demon. And this was for all of the Chaos Gods, for most of the lesser Chaos Gods, and, as it was presumed at that time, for the Skaven as well, which would be the greater demons, which manifests in many different ways, your lesser demons, which there was no answer for, the beast, which was the rats. They already existed, and they existed inside Warhammer at that era, so that slot got filled, and the steed, what would the various things ride? And that was left with somewhat of a gap. So I think if you were out there wanting to make something, you've got a lesser demon and a steed to consider. Now, remember, steeds don't necessarily just mean something you can ride like it's a horse. Take, for example, the Nurgle steed, which is the palanquin of Nurgle, and that involves a whole bunch of Nurglings carrying them around. Steeds can manifest in different ways, but if you want to build your own, you've got a lesser demon and a steed to work on.
And also that goes for there's other things you play around with as well, like the roleplay game introduced like the classification of like imp demons, which are even further down the
or they even called that a least demon in one place.
Least demon, which is such a rude name.
I think that was Rob Schwab's fault, and I remember editing it going, Rob, no, and he's like, fuck it, I'm keeping it.
Greater, lesser, least.
I mean, it makes sense, and I was like,
Itachi, hey Andy and Sotek, first time ever catching on live. Oh, well, welcome. I gotta say, these are always some of my favorite messages when people drop by, like, and are like, I'm here live for the first time ever, and just we really appreciate that. Thank you. I've been watching since the start, and I just want to share you both are wonderful. Much love. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yes, I agree that whenever one of these pops up, I can't help but get one of those little heart swellings where you're like, oh, thanks, and I'm so glad that you're popping in to say hi, and thanks so much for supporting us.
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem.
Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. You're 100% correct. It is indeed me, and I'll take any Taylor Swift reference. I even have a little Taylor Swift little band right here from when I went and saw her live. I can't go wrong with a Taylor Swift reference. Well done. Thanks.
I will always be deeply amused at how successful my sister was at getting my parents into being big time Swifties through the whole football pipeline and everything. Like, she got them good. She got them real good. Joe Miller, so we need to make artifacts for your Wind Wolf deity. Understood. If you do, we'd love to see them. If you want to like write up your own ideas for that or make art of it or whatever, that'd be sick.
Yeah, totally. Start a thread over in the Lorebeards Discord. Writing artifacts is actually super easy because it requires often less than a sentence or two, just a few sentences, and then a quick set of rules for how you imagine it could work. And you don't even need to know Warhammer, or indeed Total War, or indeed Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, because you can write it descriptively. You can say it allows them to do this sort of thing. Creating artifacts is super fun, super easy, and also super fast. And you tend to find when you engage with the community as a whole, you might find someone out there who plays Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or Total War, goes, wait a minute, I think it would work like this. And you start some really cool discussions and end up creating collectively something super cool. So yes, please, anyone out there who wants to build this sort of thing, go do it. Open some threads out in the Warhammer Fantasy forum side over in the Discord, and let's see where it goes.
Lindsay saying that implies the existence of a most demon. I feel like to keep it to the same stupidity level, it should be grossed, greater, lesser, least. The greatest demon. Yeah, the greatest, greater, lesser, least. Ricky Chapman had a Guts versus Warhammer discussion last night, except it was Guts versus Wolfric the Wanderer. We determined that both would die of their wounds. I mean, that'd be the fun way to end it.
Yeah, that seems fair.
I could see those two being both the kind of guys that they're both dead, but still like standing on their feet in their heavy armor, just standing there. Someone comes across them later and they're like, what the fuck happened here? That would be fun. That'd be a cool story. Watchdog for Andy. In the Vermin Lord scene in Lawhammer, you gave it the ability to potentially transform all non-Skaven into Skaven. Could you see that happen in Warhammer? That is literally just a basic spell in Warhammer. It's called Dreaded 13.
Yep. So yeah, I took a situation that had already been spelled up because it had already been hinted at in the lore before that as well. So the spell got created after the lore suggestion that the Skaven were created from another species. And then the spell came along and said, actually, you can also do that with a spell. And I made it an innate ability of this particular greater demon. So whenever it manifested, the people around it could turn into Skaven because of its very presence. And that was super fun. Sadly, it didn't happen anywhere near as much as I hoped because I randomized it. And I was really hopeful that we'd end up with loads of them, but we only ended up with like, well, fuck all, really. It was pretty depressing from my perspective. But yeah, I don't think this is a great stretch at all because it's already in the game. I just took something that was in the game and I tied it up into one particular greater demon.
Yeah, because in the tabletop, Dread 13 was a spooky fucking spell. I mean, it was like, granted, you could roll like Andy and it would just whiff. But it was like, you would target an enemy and it was like 4d6 models turned into Skaven. And if you got the whole unit, they turned into a new Clan Rat unit, which was very funny.
Yep. Super fun.
Let's see here. Getting Gleeful, future stream idea, building other Great Horn Rat Demons. Yeah, I mean, that'd be something we could definitely do at some point.
Yeah, there could definitely be something in that because what we'd want, if you were, for example, building them, we would want to build something that felt like we weren't just creating something that didn't exist and filling up the gap. We'd want to feel like we were creating something that had always existed and the existing lore of Warhammer had them in it all along. So why don't we have them marked out? So how do they work in such a fashion that we've added to the setting without contradicting the setting, which is where I broadly prefer to do creations. Having said that, though, if we're doing an entirely new edition's worth, I'd just add them without any fear at all. For example, 8th edition came along and said, hey, yeah, you know the Empire Army? Well, now it's got demogryphs. They always had demogryphs. Before 8th edition, demogryphs didn't exist. But suddenly, demogryphs were a thing.
I will say, it's so funny living in the age we do now, especially with like 40K kind of going through that. Well, they'll be like, this has always been the case, this thing. And people are like, how dare they? And it's like, you must be new around here. This is normal operating procedure.
That should be an F, not a VE.
Gosh, Lindsay, gosh. What is this, token?
yeah. Lindsay, how could you? It's dwarfs.
Jonathan King. So what you're saying is that the Lizardman City stream could happen in February, my birth month. Sweet. It could. Yeah.
It could. It could.
My birthday month.
Well, there we go. Maybe I should sort it out for that. Oh God.
Yeah,
it is, though, I will state, my fault. Let's make it very clear.
Oh, don't worry. I'll remind him of that too. Mr. Demgardy. First time live since 2023.
Nice to see you, Mr. Demgard. It's been a while.
How do you like my idea of QUEEK as a kind of mad seer, enabling his combat prowess, talking heads, and plot armor? You rock. I'm saying that he's like a latent wizard and doesn't realize it. That super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yes. I think that the correct answer for him is probably somewhere in those areas. You could argue also blessed by the Horned Rat if you prefer. So the Horned Rat is granting him access to stuff, but it doesn't look Horned Ratty. It just doesn't. It looks like he's somehow accessing the winds of magic, particularly the winds of death. And as to why that's the case, I think you could come up with many answers. But I think the answer that the author came up with, which is he's mad, is ultimately unsatisfying.
Yeah, especially because Geimer will go back to prove himself wrong, which I'll talk about in a little bit with a book that he did for the end times. Darius Rose, Wild was an apostle cut from the anime due to how awful he is. Wow, that says a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Leads an army of convicted criminals that are scared of him, loves fighting in fights with a log, similar to QUEEK, but more demented. I mean, yeah, you have to keep in mind that QUEEK is violent and loves fighting and is very, very high on his own supply. But QUEEK has a very... compared to what a lot of Skaven are like and what a lot of Skaven do, QUEEK is, if anything, surprisingly noble, which is weird. Like, because when you think about him and you kind of look at him, you're like, that's not a term I would use to describe him. And I would say you're right, but you're also wrong at the same time. He's a very unique character, which is what makes him so fun. Of that, by Skaven standard, if QUEEK was a man, he would be considered by many to be heroic.
Especially by his own.
Yeah.
I mean, for a Skaven, I agree. But for a human, he would be the worst.
Oh, yeah, he'd be terrible. Like, he's terrible.
Just the worst. Yeah, but for a Skaven, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
He has bizarrely noble qualities when you're comparing him against other Skaven.
Apologies for laughing, but there's a conversation going on in chat at the moment between the spelling of elves and elves and dwarves and dwarfs, and it's making me laugh.
Now, I do love the idea that the humans were like, so we're going to spell it dwarves in our language. And dwarves are like, no, that's too close to elves. No, you have to use different letters.
It's dwarves.
We will not use the same letter as elves. So, back to QUEEK. We left off with the arrival of the Vermin Lords, where Lurklox, who is the Vermin Lord Deceiver, ends up throwing his weight behind QUEEK and is trying to lead QUEEK to victory in Carrick 8 Peaks. Meanwhile, there is another party, which is the Vermin Lord Soothnar, who is attempting to lead a new Greyseer that has entered the situation named Greyseer Cranskrit to victory himself, and also kill QUEEK in the process. Because Soothnar is actually very pro Greyseer clan and wants the Greyseer clan to recapture its position on the Council of 13 through Cranskrit. And he believes the best way to do so will be to basically co-opt QUEEK's victory, kill QUEEK, and have Cranskrit step up onto the council. While Lurklox hates the Greyseers and thinks they're dumb and a waste of time, and that QUEEK should have the position instead, because that's better for his personal goals. So, this leads to a genuinely fairly convoluted series of events that is the war for Carrick 8 Peaks.
Convoluted. It's a V, not a D.
Convoluted. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. I had to correct it. It's been like 2 years.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's good. One of the things that to show how serious this war is, to show what the Skaven are like when they're focused, which is what we're at right now, is the Skaven as a focus instrument, which the lore has always implied is a doomsday situation. Like, if the Skaven ever got their shit together, everyone else is fucked. And the end times for the War of Carrick 8 Peaks genuinely realizes this in a very, very good way. Because what's been happening is that QUEEK, granted, he's only been fighting in the War for Carrick 8 Peaks for about 5 or 6 years at this point. Actually, it'd be 25, 23, so 7 years at this point. And QUEEK genuinely has been a horrible addition to the war. Like, he has been very successful in a very small amount of time, because all of the warlords before him were getting absolutely clowned on by Skarsnik, like to a hilarious extent. Skarsnik has been dominating for almost the last 20 years. And QUEEK shows up and is like a big shaker and mover, and the Skaven suddenly become a very, very big threat again. But despite all that time, QUEEK has mostly been playing by the old book, which is that he goes out, he wins fights, he takes territory, then he goes somewhere else to do some other mission, or he's in another part of Carrick 8 Peaks, and the dwarves and the greenskins take back what he just took, and they're basically in an eternal stalemate because they're trying to conquer. Mm-hmm. But what Nodwell tells him is, stop playing with your food. The war needs to end. It doesn't matter if you capture it, just bring the war to an end. So he sends a QUEEK an army that is so fucking big that in order for QUEEK to just inspect the army, so just to see all the different regiments, takes 5 days of walking, with every chamber being packed full of thousands and thousands and thousands of Skaven. It takes 5 days. That's a horrifically huge army. Mm-hmm. I mean, think how much space you could cross in a day, and remember that these are Skaven. They move faster than us. And it still takes 5 fucking days. And it's not just Clan Moors. It's like all the clans throwing their weight behind this, because they all want to be involved in Nodwell's big victory to see if he can actually pull it off, while also making sure their agents are there to try and kneecap him so he won't be successful. Mm-hmm. So there are many, many assassination attempts. A lot of people try to kill QUEEK, but Lurklocks always lets him know they're coming. So QUEEK always has the jump on him, which means he wins, to put it very bluntly. And we have this constant buildup of, is QUEEK going to be able to pull it off? And what does QUEEK do to initiate this kind of final saga? Well, in 25-23, QUEEK has the Skaven undermine and deliver bombs to all 8 of the mountains of Carrick 8 Peaks, the 8 peaks. Because they're Skaven, 4 of them go off. The other 4 don't, because they get killed by greenskins or dwarves, or just fuck up because Skaven. Of those 4, 3 of the mountains are basically crippled, and 1 of the mountains is completely leveled. So for the greenskins and the dwarfs, this is an oh shit moment of something. These peaks have stood here unviolated, passing control, but seemingly invulnerable for thousands of years, and the Skaven just blow it up. Mm-hmm. And that is the sign that this is it. This is the war. So QUEEK unleashes his legions. They are nasty. Skarsnik, though, continues to be a massive pain in the ass. And Belegar, for all that the Skaven are desperately attempting to overwhelm him, he is in his element. Belegar knows how to hold the line. He's good at this. And eventually, this builds up to the Skaven are kind of held at bay for a good bit. And then the new wave shows up, which is that the Storm Fiends are unleashed. Now, because they're also trying to sell you the minis, the Storm Fiends are kind of like overly showcased as being these unstoppable threats. But to be fair, they are rat ogres with attached brains to their backs that make them as smart as a regular Skaven, essentially, wielding horrifically powerful weapons. And they are able to push the dwarf defenses, and this leads to a really, really big climactic 3-way battle between QUEEK, Skarsnik, and Belegar. In the which is the battle of the Hall of Skalfton. And the thing is with this big battle is that Belegar genuinely had the battle under control, surprisingly. Where this big Skaven army shows up, QUEEK's leading it, he charges into the fray, and the dwarves are holding, and Belegar pulls out his ace in the hole, which is that Golgthag Maneater shows up with his whole ogre tribe of Maneaters, and they come waddling in and start obliterating Skaven. But unfortunately for Belegar, Belagar tried to pull one over on the ogres because he basically offered them like half of his treasury, but it's Belagar, so there's basically nothing in it. And Belagar knows that. But Skarsnik also knows that. And when Skarsnik finds out about these ogres, he gives the actual crown of Carragate Peaks, which is gorgeous, to Goldfag Maneater as a payment to say, hey, when I give you the signal, I need you to betray Belagar and help me win this fight instead. So the dwarves go from winning the fight to really bad situation when the ogres that are on their flank and holding their flank suddenly turn and start attacking them when Skarsnik arrives. And QUEEK, for his credit, is fucking furious about Skarsnik's entire involvement in the whole thing. Because QUEEK just kind of wants to have an epic fight versus Belagar. And every time he's about to get him, usually Skarsnik interrupts what's going on. And no matter how hard QUEEK tries, he just can't get to Skarsnik. Because Skarsnik's not a fucking idiot. If he sees QUEEK coming, he runs away. Every time. QUEEK has never successfully gotten to duel Skarsnik, because Skarsnik always runs away.
Wisely.
And this fight's no different, where like Skarsnik shows up in the middle of the battle, and QUEEK tries to get to him, and by the time he gets there, he's already gone. But QUEEK does get into a fight with Belagar. And this is where QUEEK does something that's actually very unusual for him, which is that when QUEEK fights Belagar, he doesn't use his normal blade, his normal like sawtooth blade, which is just a mundane weapon, but it looks really cool. Instead, QUEEK, because he's been instructed that he's supposed to be ending things, he uses a poisoned weapon. And he actually manages to stab Belagar with it. Just enough that Belagar's blood gets infected. But Belagar escapes the battle. And everyone kind of goes their separate ways. But the dwarfs are functionally defeated. They are dealt enough of a blow at the Hall of Clan Skalfton that they are no longer a major contender, and they're basically just huddling, trying not to die out. And this, with the dwarfs now dealt with, is when QUEEK turns his full attention on Skarsnik. And we get one of the biggest battles in the Thankful Book, which is saying a lot, which is the battle in the Great Vale. So for this fight, for those that don't know, there's a giant valley at the top of Carragate Peaks, where you've got the old over dwarf town where Belagar's hold up. So there's like a big dwarf fortress up there that was built out in the open. And then there's a big valley. And in that valley is Goblin Town, where the Greenskins very obnoxiously hang out and are little bastards. And Skarsnik hangs out a lot there. And QUEEK goes in to smash it all down. And this leads to a very big ambush battle where Skarsnik pulls out all the stops to fight QUEEK, and he would have won if Lurklocks had not gotten involved. But QUEEK does have a couple of big moments during this fight. Very notably, QUEEK shows off that he is a lot smarter than everyone gives him credit for, because he basically assassinates every rival of his simultaneously. Where, for instance, QUEEK had sent Ska Bloodtail to pull out a very particular component out of a Warlock Engineer's Doom Wheel. Actually, this might have happened during the Karakazul thing, not the End Times thing. But either way, QUEEK sabotages a Doom Wheel so that it explodes after it goes charging into battle, which is hilarious, and kills someone that he doesn't like. He also intentionally sends off several of his lieutenants into situations where he basically cuts them off from reinforcements and they get killed. And QUEEK himself makes an excellent performance, because he goes up against a Black Orc war boss riding on a wyvern that came in from the Darklands. And QUEEK duels this war boss 1-on-2, where he fights the wyvern and the war boss simultaneously, and QUEEK kills both of them very successfully. It's a very cool sequence. It's actually very well described in the novel. I highly recommend reading it. It's literally just called Rise of the Horned Rat. But it has this. It's basically an anime duel, where like QUEEK impales Dwarf Gouger into the eye socket of the wyvern, and then the wyvern like rears up in pain, and QUEEK lets go, so it flings him in the air, and then he's basically where the sun is, so the orc looks up and can't quite see him, and QUEEK comes down spinning like a fucking Beyblade and cuts the orc's head off with his sword using the momentum. Like it's ridiculous. But QUEEK makes incredible showing of himself. He kills several big bad greenskins and shows that at this point he's still in his prime. He won't be for much longer, but he still is. But Skarsnik gets away again, though Skarsnik's squig Gobla is killed in these events, which drives Skarsnik to depression, which is genuinely quite rare for greenskins.
Poor Gobla.
Yeah, and this is where QUEEK is actually goes through a pretty big moment, which is that Lurklocks, from QUEEK's perspective, so the Vermin Lord that has been backing QUEEK, betrays him, which is that Lurklocks wants the war to come to an end. He really wants to come to an end right now. And so Lurklocks basically goes behind QUEEK's back and goes to see Skarsnik and offers him a deal, which is, he says, we will give you the head of Belagar if you will just fucking leave. Please leave. Because they realize Skarsnik is kind of a problem. And this is also a very hilarious scene, in my opinion, because it's revealed that Skarsnik has the skull of a Vermin Lord hanging above his bed, which, like, opens several questions, none of which are answered, but it's just kind of a okay, move on moment. But Skarsnik ultimately accepts. And QUEEK, when he finds out, is fucking pissed. Like, he's beyond angry. Because to QUEEK, this is, I mean, from a Skaven perspective, this is a very obvious W. But from QUEEK's perspective, this is stupid for two big reasons. Number one is, he sees this as cowardly and it's not how he operates. Actually, three reasons. Number two is, this means he won't get to kill Skarsnik, which to him is unacceptable. And he also has to give away Belagar's head, which is unacceptable. And lastly, Lurklocks just kind of like sniped this from under him. Didn't consult him, didn't ask for his opinion, is basically just treating him like a toy. And this is where QUEEK starts to reach a level of fed up with the Vermin Lord. Despite the fact that Lurklocks has been pivotal to his survival and victories several times at this point. And QUEEK says, fine, I'll get to kill Belagar, but at this point he's already scheming to get rid of Lurklocks. And this builds up to the final battle and one of the best moments with QUEEK in the entire End Times, in my opinion, which is his final duel with Belagar. Which is that QUEEK plays dirty, surprisingly dirty, because you can tell everything that's going on, all of the manipulation, all the scheming, it's starting to get to him, and he's acting differently. He's using poison weapons. When the final battle against Belagar, instead of leading from the front like he normally does, he just he does a normal Skaven tactic. He sends in wave after wave after wave of trash to just grind the last survivors of Belagar's group down until Belagar is the only one left standing, and Belagar is exhausted. Because not only has he been killing Skaven constantly, but it's revealed that he was poisoned, and it actually it infected his blood, and Belagar is like at least a good 40, 50 pounds lighter because he's sick. Like, he's horribly sick. He's running a fever. He's weak. And QUEEK didn't do his usual vulnerable thing. And what you see is that QUEEK is getting scared. QUEEK can feel the fact that he's getting slower. He can feel the fact that he's aging. He's being more cautious. And the thing that I love is that on a meta level, almost like the influence of the Great Horned Rat, he gets punished for this. Which is that when QUEEK goes in for his final duel against Belagar, they have their big final fight, and QUEEK does some really nasty shit. Like, while they're fighting, Belagar gets him good a couple times. Like, he punches him hard enough with his shield that he really messes up QUEEK's face and part of his shoulder. And they're continuing to fight, but the way QUEEK finally gets him is that they're talking and they're back and forthing, and Belagar has reached a level of I don't give a fuck that he actually starts to get under QUEEK's skin. because he starts pointing out to QUEEK that QUEEK has been cheating and that QUEEK's been playing dirty and that he's a coward. And it starts to actually genuinely upset QUEEK, because QUEEK he's kind of like the Joker, if you've ever watched like the really good Batman movies and stuff, where he can dish it out, but he can't take it. He can't take it. Very fragile ego. And when Belagar just starts continuously pointing out how many of QUEEK's victories aren't his, or he's been acting like a cowardly rat in ways that no dwarf ever would, and that he's completely without honor, he's completely without glory, he's just a shameful, skulking vermin. And it actually gets QUEEK very upset. Like, for the first time, like, if you read through all of his books and everything, QUEEK starts losing it because he's getting so genuinely emotionally distressed by Belagar just telling him like it is, because he knows it's true. But QUEEK has an ace in the hole, which I will always give big props to the writers for remembering this was a thing, because it was such a cool moment, which is that QUEEK tells Belagar as they're fighting, and Belagar's holding him off, despite being sick, despite being wounded. Belagar is literally holding him off and shield bashing him in the face and trading blows with him. QUEEK rattles his trophy rack and goes, "Don't you recognize, like, I want this moment to be big. I brought out my most special trophy for this. Don't you recognize him? I brought your brother." And Belagar literally looks up and sees that the desiccated remains of his brother are literally on QUEEK's trophy rack.
Great moment.
Which is great. And that's how QUEEK gets him. Because in the split second that Belagar takes his eyes off of QUEEK, QUEEK's able to use Dwarf Gouger to basically hook it around the rim of Belagar's shield and rip it away from him. And if you've ever listened to us talk about Belagar, you should know that the shield, the Shield of Defiance, Belagar's shield, is a bullshit tier shield. Like, it is one of the most, like, over the top OP shields in the setting, and could not get to it. But QUEEK gets the shield away from him, and this leads to him impaling. He does his big fancy whirlwind attack, and he impales Belagar in the head with Dwarf Gouger. And that's but this is where the shoe drops, where QUEEK finally gets punished for all the shit he's been doing leading up to this moment, which is that Belagar, when his shield had got torn away from him and he goes down on one knee, what he had done is he had smacked QUEEK's sword out of his hand earlier in the fight. And when QUEEK goes for this big overhand coup de grace, Belagar grabs QUEEK's own sword and shoves it upwards, and it goes right into QUEEK's armpit and stabs him. And it fucks QUEEK up bad. Like, it goes all the way in, and it's a sawtooth blade, so it gets all caught up in his muscles and everything, and QUEEK is in agony, and he rips it out, and all the other Skiven are like, "Oh shit." Which this is spooky for QUEEK, because in Skavendom, if you show weakness, if you have a warlord that gets really wounded at a moment like this, it is not unusual at all for to run, or for your chieftain to try and kill you, because you're vulnerable now.
Yeah.
So QUEEK has to try and hold in the fact that he is in crippling pain. And it's such a good moment, because all the shit QUEEK's been doing leading up to this moment, he doesn't get the satisfaction of a clean kill on Belagar. Belagar gets to die with the satisfaction of knowing he fucking got him. And QUEEK rages. He rages. He saws off Belagar's head, but he doesn't even get to keep Belagar's head. He has to give it away. So he doesn't get the satisfaction of keeping Belagar's head, his most prized trophy. And he does. He gives it away, because now QUEEK is genuinely scared, because QUEEK knows that arm, basically useless.
Yep.
QUEEK is now weak, and we leave QUEEK on this sour note. And then we time skip. And the next time we see QUEEK, because Skarsnik does leave, he tries to nuke Karakay Peaks, which, The author, I think, should have had Carrick Apex blown up, but for some reason they didn't, and then it just doesn't go anywhere, and it's really weird.
The conclusion to that story is a bit meh.
Yeah, Skarsnik's conclusion is very weird.
Meh.
Yeah, but Carrick Apex is emptied, and with the dwarfs dead and the greenskins fled, the Skaven go, okay, we won, we're leaving, and they leave, and Carrick Apex is just left as a horrible empty tomb. So the Skaven don't even get the satisfaction of like keeping it. And QUEEK, for his success, is appointed basically as the Grand General of Skavendom. So he's put in charge of all the big armies. And the next time we catch up with him is in the final year or two of the end times, which is 25-27, where QUEEK is now leading an army to attack Karazakarak in the final great battle of the Skaven versus the dwarfs. And QUEEK, at this point, it's been a couple more years, is old.
It's also worth pointing out the difference here between taking out 8 peaks and Karazakarak. It's a big difference. It's a little bit like taking a dwarven outpost versus taking on the dwarven capital, because that's exactly what it is. The dwarven capital at an extraordinarily peak of power at that. A lot of dwarf focus have been given to its capital. There's at least 1 million dwarfs there at its core population. It is a truly big, well-defended hold. By comparison, 8 Peaks has been a war zone for freaking ever. It's a war zone. This isn't a war zone that they've managed to dominate. This is a proper siege on the most defended hold in the world.
And QUEEK at this point, when we see him, he's looking rough. He actually has like an augmented eyepiece to help his failing vision, though he kills anyone that mentions it, and he also killed the engineer that made it for him. And Nodwell is constantly holding that, oh, you want that elixir? You got to do this thing. You want that elixir? You got to do this thing. He basically keeps moving the goalpost, with the ultimate goal being, hey, kill the Dwarf High King, take his head, and because the Council of 13, because they have an empty seat due to the death of Kritislik, basically says whoever kills Thorgrim Grudgebearer, brings his head back, will get the council seat. And so by this point in the story, it's basically a game of figuring out who's going to get the head, with everyone making back deals and doing all sorts of stuff to try and figure out who's going to get it. And QUEEK is older. His arm still hurts horribly. He's still...
You know, there's a pretty important story. Let's get our super chats out of the way before we dive into this one.
Yeah, because this is technically the end story.
It's the end story for QUEEK, so I think it's pretty important we get that chat out of the way first.
Yeah, the Exile one. Cheers, lads, and happy holidays. Just got the Sea of Claws and Imperial Zoo book. Keep up the great work. Awesome. Have a fun time with those.
Hope you enjoy them.
Yeah, the Imperial Zoo. It's pretty fun. They wrote that one in an interesting way. Where it kind of like follows like some sagas of some various characters, and it's a good time. Stephen Lucas, missed chances, Rat Dead Speaker versus Dwarf Ghost Army. That would have been cool, but stay tuned for after the super chats moment. Darius, QUEEK when he's 8 years old. I hurt myself today. Yes. To see if I still slay.
I focus on the screams, the only thing that's real.
Yep.
Brilliant.
There's more. Yeah, this definitely appears to be a reference to something I am too.
It's Hurt, a song by Nine Inch Nails, which was later sung by, his name just suddenly escaped my head. And is a great song.
Oh, well, there you go. So yeah, QUEEK, this does seem like a song QUEEK would be singing.
Skulls, I will let you down. QUEEK will make you happy. Johnny Cash, thank you very much. I couldn't remember who did the I couldn't remember his name, of course. I can remember the video. It was freaking amazing. Also, his rendition is amazing. Just his name just fled my head because I'm old.
Joe Mellon, I know y'all said it's complicated, but let's build a hold.
Oh, it is complicated. Yeah, one day we'll come up with a good way of doing that one, because I think it is a good idea.
I need Andy to scream Thorgrim's grudges to QUEEK. I don't want Andy to destroy his voice, so I don't think we're going to have him do it. Because it's a surprisingly long-winded speech when it's, despite how much Thorgrim is like shredding his vocals to say it. All right, that gets us caught up. So, QUEEK shows up, and this is where we get our big moment where, because I believe it was David Geimer that wrote this book. QUEEK's heads, the truth of them is revealed fundamentally, which is that when QUEEK is standing on this big, like hill, and he can see the Everpeak in the distance, and it talks about how there is so many Skaven that, like, there's millions and millions of Skaven attacking the Everpeak at this point. Like, it just looks like a tide of rat bodies leading up to the mountain in the distance. And QUEEK is watching this, and it talks about how, you know, the sky's never been the same since Morslib blew up, because this is post the destruction of Morslib. The vortex has been unbound, so there's magic fucking everywhere. You can't see the stars anymore because it's all covered, like, magic is covering the sky, and like warpstone dust is all in the sky and everything. And QUEEK, there's so much magic that even the characters that don't have the second sight, like QUEEK, can see it. That's how much fucking magic there is in the air. And this is where we get one of the coolest drops for the story, which is that QUEEK is talking to the skulls on the back. And QUEEK mentions that ever since the moon blew up, most of the time they either say nothing or they're just screaming endlessly. But when he's looking at the Everpeak and he's talking to his skulls kind of absentmindedly, the skull of the dwarf on the back, whose the eye sockets are said to be blazing with magic, Krug Ironhand, basically acts, instead of doing what he's done for the last almost decade of telling QUEEK how great he is and how amazing he is and giving him information and everything, when QUEEK's kind of like, oh, what are you going to do? The Krug says, you're going to die, QUEEK. You're going to die, and it's going to be a glorious day. You will be ruined. Your people will be ruined. You will fail, and I will laugh. And QUEEK has this moment of like, what the fuck? Because that's the first time any of the skulls have talked to him like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, like, instead of them doing what he wants them to do, it seems to be like there's so much magic, and because QUEEK himself is getting weaker, that the spirits that are bound to those remains are becoming themselves again. And spoiler, they all hate him.
What a surprise! Yeah, and in many respects, if you're looking to try and understand this, there's lots of ways it can be justified. If it's QUEEK as innate spellcaster, the amount of magic in the world is now overpowering him, and he's no longer capable of controlling those spirits in the way that he once was capable of doing. If, for example, it's QUEEK as blessed servant of the Horned Rat, you can again easily explain it as the Horned Rat himself is concerned with very different things. And magic in the world is now empowering these effective artifacts in their own way. If it's just QUEEK's madness and you want to do that, QUEEK himself is going through an absolute shit show of a time because he's getting old. He's full of fear. It's reaching that point where his mind is fracturing and his body is fracturing as well. And it naturally fits in with that entire idea where everything is turning against him. And his psychosis is very much supporting that too. It pretty much fits any of the various interpretations that you prefer. But loosely, poor old QUEEK's in trouble.
Yep. So the big battle goes down, and QUEEK at this point, like, he's still scary. He's still, he notes to himself in his inner monologue that he's slower than he used to be, but he's still faster than most Skaven. He's still very nasty, very strong. And he has his little meeting with like Ikit Claw and all them about, what they're going to do and all this. And Ikit, there's a very funny thing where Ikit's bragging about the fact that he's brought all of his war machines. He's got hundreds of like warp lightning cannons, all this other stuff. He's augmented all of them. He's going to show the superiority of the dwarfs. And they surround the mountain, and QUEEK gets settled in for a long siege. Only for very suddenly the entire mountainside rumbles as every single dwarf cannon and war machine that's been basically silent all fire at the same time, and Ikit Claw's battery line gets obliterated instantly. Like all those Morph Lightning, all that superior Skaven technology just ripped to shreds in a heartbeat. And to Queek's genuine shock, the doors open and Thorgrim Grudgebearer marches out on his throne, on the throne of power at the head of his entire throng, saying, "Fuck you, we're coming to you.
Come at me."
Yeah, and Queek is delighted. This isn't going to be a long siege after all. And the big final battle goes down, the Battle of Karazakarak, which is honestly one of my favorite big fights in the end times.
It might be my favorite fight from the end times. I was thinking back in it before this episode, and I think it might be my favorite one, not necessarily because it's the most epic or the best of all the fights, but because it feels like a really good story reaching towards a conclusion. It's part of a bigger piece that has a really nice end, and I like this one. It's pretty good.
Yeah, all the characters that participate in it, which is a lot, are well written. They act in ways that make sense, and there are consequences. And it's great.
It's good. This is a good one.
Yeah. So this big battle breaks out, and basically what it is that Thorgrim in this moment showcases why Thorgrim is kind of a genius in a lot of ways, and why he is the High King, which is that the biggest trick about the Skaven, especially at this point in the end times, is the Skaven have a tried and true form of dealing with dwarves, which is that they know the dwarves are going to lock in and hunker down, and that's what the Skaven want them to do, because the Skaven know how to deal with it.
And they know what the roots.
Yeah, and there's so many of them that they eventually can just tire the dwarfs out. Whereas Thorgrim says, no, we're going to march out there and challenge them to a big fight, because at the end of the day, we're better than them. And to be frank, Thorgrim was right.
Yeah, it's a fine example of doing the stupid thing, but actually paying off, not because it's stupid, but because their opponents are uniquely poor at dealing with it. And the clever thing for the dwarves, the obvious thing, the only thing really, is to hunker down. But it's a battle they will lose. They're already dead. This is not something they're going to get relief from. They are going to die. And Thorgrim, rather than doing the fatalistic thing, which is, well, something might come, something might occur, not fatalistic, pardon me, the hopeful thing. Something might occur, something might come, we might survive. All we need to do is hold, down through them being dwarves, likely a decade or so. Does the exact opposite. He says, no, we're going to lose this. We're going to lose. So because we're going to lose, we're going to have to do something different to ensure that we can survive. And does what is the classic Warhammer thing of sallying forth from the perfect bastion that can never be taken. And it's the least dwarfy of options that anyone would normally consider. But it's also, given what he's facing, possibly the only way that he can win against the Skaven, because the Skaven have to be quickly broken before they embed in.
Yep. So Thorgrim charges out, and Queek basically goes to meet him. Because for Queek, going after Thorgrim is the only thing that matters, because Thorgrim is his access to the elixir of immortal youth, essentially.
Yep.
To getting his strength back, to being on the Council of 13, to surviving. And this is where Queek tries to be what he once was, tries to lead from the front, tries to lean on all that arrogance. But that little niggling injury that Belegar dealt him years ago, Belegar's little revenge undoes him. Mm-hmm. Because when Queek goes forward, he's still spooky. He still sights through a lot of Thorgrim's like honor guard, the hammerers and stuff. He's still killing dwarfs left and right. But Thorgrim sees him, and Thorgrim basically just starts screaming at him.
I can help you.
Yeah. So where Thorgrim orders his throne bearers to stop, gets off the throne of power, and starts marching towards Queek, just screaming. He just starts yelling all of the things that Queek has ever done. Because Thorgrim is an obsessive old man. This is a dwarf that has read the Great Book of Grudges, which is huge, end to end, endlessly.
It's also worth noting a difference here between old age with dwarves and old age with Skaven. Old age with Skaven, he's creeping now into almost his teens. He's an old Skaven. He is old. And like most species, when they get old, they become frail. Dwarves do the same. They become frail in age unless there is something keeping them going. No, never has this been more expressly expressed? Pardon me, that was really clumsy. Never has this been more expressly given evidence than with people like the old High King Starbreaker or with Crag the Grim, who had oaths that kept them in place. The old High King made an oath that he would not rest until the dwarfs had reclaimed the elven crown and won the War of the Beard, the War of Vengeance. He would not rest. And he goes for hundreds of years at full peak strength until he claims that crown, the war ends, and then he dies of old age like the next day.
He immediately dies.
Okay, he just falls over dead. Crag the Grim, in his obsession to find the perfect runes, just keeps on going again and again, year and year and year, without ever weakening. Somewhat similarly, Thorgrim is an obsessive dwarf, and he, even though he is old, is at peak strength because his will drives him forward. Dwarves are a different species to others, unlike the elves who just have immortality yawning before them until they give up or they're cut down or whatever. They just kind of fade away. The dwarves, if they've got a reason to keep going, they keep going. And Thorgrim, unlike our poor aging Queek, is at peak, and you could probably fire 1,000 shots into that dwarf. He will just keep coming at you.
Yeah, to be clear, this is still Thorgrim after having been stabbed by a fucking Vermin Lord Warbringer. He's got a fatal wound in his side, and he's like, nope, I'm not dying.
Nope,
fuck this.
He will not stop because he will not die until his purpose is seen through.
Yeah, so Thorgrim is literally just, and it's such a fucking good scene. It's genuinely one of the best scenes where Thorgrim is just yelling like, for the death of such and such and his clan, the head of Queek, for the head of Queek. And Queek is like, oh, he's listing, like, Queek tries to do his usual thing, which is he tries to get under Thorgrim's skin, which is how he ultimately got Belegar, was that Belegar was holding him off until he managed to get under his skin with the whole, like, I've got your brother on my back thing. And Queek tries taunting Thorgrim. Like, he tries basically being like, oh, you're listing off all my greatest hits and yada, yada, yada. Like, he's smarmy. And Thorgrim literally just basically tells him, shut the fuck up. I'm not done. You also did this. You did. And Thorgrim is so laser focused that Queek just can't get a word in because Thorgrim just shouts over him. Like, Queek is so used to dwarfs hating him that they're like grinding their teeth and pulling their beards and listening to him just like taunt them. And Thorgrim just doesn't let him get a word in. Thorgrim just literally shouts over him and is just stomping towards him, ready to kill him. And Queek goes for his crazy, super over-the-top whirlwind attack that he's really, really infamous for. Like, Queek's whirlwind attack is beyond famous. And this is where the big pivotal moment comes, where Queek brings Dwarf Gouger down. And Dwarf Gouger is a horrific weapon. We talked a lot about it in the last stream. This thing was carefully, specifically designed by the Skaven to kill dwarfs. That is the only purpose of this weapon. It was made by the Skaven during the original war, way hundreds of years ago, or thousands of years ago, at Carrick 8 Peaks, to destroy anything dwarf made. That is its only purpose. And Thorgrim, Queek did not know two things about this pivotal moment. The number one being that all of the runes on all of Thorgrim's equipment were literally blazing with magic because the lore of metal itself had rooted into the Throne of Power. And Thorgrim was just like glowing with shaman. But
you're into the wind.
Yeah, we can't fucking see that shit. And the second thing is that Queek doesn't know what the Axe of Grimnir is, nor what it does.
I mean, how could he?
Yeah, how could he? And here's the thing about the Axe of Grimnir. It is fast as fuck, boy.
It's a freaking god weapon.
Yeah.
It's Grimnir.
Yeah, the Axe of Grimnir it's one of its things that it's not just a tabletop rule. It's actually shown when it's used in the lore, like during the Age of Vengeance and this moment, is that it makes the dwarf wielding it nightmare fast. Like, you can't see them move the weapon levels of fast. Like, an elf goes, holy fuck, that weapon is fast.
Yeah.
And
I mean, this is, let's be as clear as we can be for those of you who don't know. This is the weapon of an ancestor god. And it is a weapon that god went, yep, this is worthy of me. A god went, yeah, this weapon's good. Not a dwarf, a god. The peak dwarf you can possibly imagine, their ancestors' gods went, yep, this is good. This is worthy of me bearing. That should hopefully give you an idea. This is not just a simple artifact created to kill Skaven, for example, like Dwarf Gouger to kill dwarfs. This is one of the peak artifacts of Warhammer, the War Axe, if you will. And it is about to show just how good it is.
Yeah. Now, you might expect, if you've never read the story and you're not familiar with it, or 2 or 3, you might expect that this breaks into a big epic duel. And I imagine there was a temptation to do this, but I will always give massive credit. I think David Geimer is mostly credited with writing the Thankful book. Is that this plays out the way it should, which is that they don't go for, this ends up being an epic conflict like it was when Gorfang Rockgut fought Thorgrim. Like when those two fought, it was a fight. Nope. This is a fucking beatdown where the moment Dwarf Gouger meets an ancestor god weapon, it explodes. Like, it just shatters. And QUEEK looks at the weapon and goes, what? Like, QUEEK can't process what just happened. And he's partially blinded by the runes on the Axe of Grimnir flashing when they shatter Dwarf Gouger. And then within the same heartbeat of movement, Thorgrim just lashes the Axe of Grimnir around and chops off QUEEK's hand holding his sword. And QUEEK looks at his stump and doesn't even feel the pain because he's stunned. Like he can't process what just happened. And Thorgrim puts down the axe and just reaches forward and grabs QUEEK by the throat. And QUEEK suddenly realizes, oh shit, because Thorgrim does not go for the easy kill. Thorgrim just starts choking him and he just starts screaming at him. And it's this moment, especially if you're like a really big Thorgrim or Dwarf fan, this moment was genuinely super emotional because Thorgrim gets to talking about the death of Belegar. And if you've never read the novella, Thorgrim and Belegar are much closer than a lot of people may think. Of that, Belegar literally grew up at Karasakarak, like he was a beardling with Thorgrim, and Thorgrim like partially raised him, and Thorgrim in many ways saw him as a son, to the extent in the novella when Belegar has a child, Belegar and his wife named their son Thorgrim after High King Thorgrim. That's how close they were. And so Belegar starts so at this point Thorgrim is screaming at QUEEK for how dare he had killed Belegar. And he just lifts him up and is choking him, and QUEEK is doing everything he can to get away. QUEEK's biting, he's scratching, he's clawing, he's punching,
stomping.
Yeah, he's like, stomping. Like he's genuinely like cutting Thorgrim's face, and Thorgrim just doesn't stop. And Thorgrim gets so angry that he can't even use words anymore, and he just wordlessly screams until his grip snaps QUEEK's neck. And and this is after he also cut off his trophy rack right before this, just as a fuck you. While QUEEK was still alive, he cuts his trophy rack off, which there's a note that's actually really creepy, but also kind of charming in a way of like when he cuts off the trophy rack, all of the skulls and all the pieces of people scream in relief as it's cut free of QUEEK. And chokes him to death, or snaps his neck. He throws QUEEK's body on the ground, and Thorgrim says the epic quote of you. I think he says like you could keep your he says like you could keep your filthy head or something like that, because he kept saying the head of Queek, and he finally basically says you can keep it, and then he just stomps on Queek's body and crushes him and all of his armor underneath his feet. And that is the death of Queek Headtaker.
Goodbye, dead. Goodbye, dead. Goodbye, Queek. And I think, mirroring what Ryan was saying, that was the correct way to do it.
Yeah, that's what it is. You can keep your head. I will not have it sully my hold.
Yeah, quite. There would have been an easier option, which would have been the giant epic conflict, which is what we'd had beforehand, but it was much more satisfying to see what Queek had become and what Thorgrim was. And what Thorgrim was as a character, the manifestation of the hate, and seeing him strangle the life out of Queek was, I think, the correct end for this one. It was good.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best characterizations of the dwarf versus Skaven conflict, which is that at the end of the day, if they met force to force, the dwarfs the Skaven are nothing to them.
Yeah. Under the correct circumstances. This is one of those ones where Thorgrim did it right. Yep. If Thorgrim had stayed inside, the Skaven, whether it was short-term or long-term, would have won. This is a battle they absolutely were going to win. And Thorgrim realized that they were all going to die. And particularly from Thorgrim's perspective, that was unacceptable. Now, you might go, of course it's unacceptable because losing is unacceptable. No, it's because of all the grudges that would not be met. And the unacceptable nature of that drove him into a position that was deeply undwarfy, which was to take off the turtle's shell and not to turtle, to do the opposite, to drive forward and reclaim those grudges. And the obvious way to do that was through Queek. And Queek, in many respects, represented everything that the Skaven had against them. Take that down, suddenly it's a different battle.
Yeah, and one of the things that's also really interesting about this fight is that something that I forgot to mention that's revealed leading up to it is by this point, Queek successfully managed to shake and or get rid of Lurklocks, the Vermin Lord. So the Vermin Lord even though he had given, he literally did, he gave Queek victory at Carrick 8 Peaks. Queek could not have done it without Lurklocks. Yeah. The method by which he did it made Queek so angry that Queek managed to successfully get rid of him. We don't know how. We don't know if he just told him off and Lurklocks was like, oh, my feelings are hurt, and he just left. Or if he had
I'm glad you said told, because I heard pulled.
Yeah. I mean, that might have worked well.
I don't remember reading that.
Yeah, but Lurklocks is not there, either because he abandoned Queek or because Queek managed to get rid of him somehow. And if he had been there for Queek in this moment, maybe it could have played out differently. But the thing that they did so well, and this is why I love the Queek story and why his end time story is actually one of my favorite, is that Queek in many ways compromised who he was in order to achieve victory with the poison blades and the using more Skavenish tactics and using forces that he would never have relied on normally. And he pays for it. And in the grand scheme, it costs him everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of that, Queek, honestly, for Queek personally, for his own personal mind, not for the grand scheme of the setting or the character, a character arc, but for his own personal development, Queek would have been happier if he had fought fair, in his version, fought fair and either died or achieved a narrow victory in Carrick 8 Peaks against Belagar than what he ended up doing, where he ended up being fucking miserable for the last 3 years of his life leading up to his death.
Yeah.
Which is great. Queek tears down his own character, and by the end of the story, we see that all of his assets betray him. The spirits, all the skulls that had always given him advice and everything, betray him, and he loses them. Dwarf Gouger shatters, betraying him, and he loses. his speed isn't and his strength aren't there because Bellegarde managed to stab him because he got cocky. And it's such a fitting storyline that leads up to the end of this character that it's just great. It's just great. It's like one of the few times I get to look at the end times and go, even if I were to rewrite this thing from scratch, I would keep almost this entire story exactly as is.
Yeah. As I say, it's one of the highlights of the end times. It's one of the ones where you look at the story that's told and you look at how, I mean, Thorgrim's end and everything that's coming. It's one of the good stories of the end times where you're like, yeah, this is definitely an end to this particular story, and it's great. Now, the whole story isn't necessarily great because there's lots of bits attached to this where we've got gaps that would have been lovely to have filled, but this part is great.
Yeah, and like even the Thanquol book is not by any means a perfect story. Like Thorgrim's death, I get it, but I wish it had been handled differently. And like a lot of the Lustria campaign was a little odd.
I'm happy to go further. Crap.
Yeah. But you know, it's way better than Kane, so you know, there's that. Yeah. Kane was a fucking clusterfuck. All right, super chat stuff. Jonathan King. As a dwarf fan, I love this. Just Thorgrim saying, we will not go quietly into the night. We will go kicking and screaming and we'll take you with us. Yes, which is what a dwarf should do.
Yeah, and I think there's possibly more than just this going on as well. Thorgrim genuinely planned and gamed out an outcome where he thought he could win. I think it's more than just not going quietly into the night. There is an aspect of this in that it's a very strong dwarfy thing to do nonetheless. But he was looking at breaking the Skaven and breaking that force around him so that it could no longer be deployed against his capital, against his home. And I think there's more to it than just simply not giving up. I think there's a clear plan here to win this battle.
Yeah, and Thorgrim, in many ways, Thorgrim is, I agree with the sentiment of that one of the core aspects of Thorgrim in the end times is Thorgrim is one of the few dwarf characters who genuinely says, we cannot just huddle down in the hold because this is the apocalypse. And if we hide down in the holds, we're going to, like, we'll die with a whimper. And I refuse. Because, Thorgrim,
I mean, as we've discussed in previous streams, Thorgrim as a character is not that dwarf.
No, he stands against a lot of dwarf traditionalism.
Yeah, and he is almost a figure of, in some respects, both deep tradition and too much obsession over all of his grudges, but also a figure of trying to build the dwarves into a new golden age. And a component of that is the dwarves winning and not hiding.
Yep. Darius Rose, QUEEK. Wait, you all hate me? Skulls. Always have.
Always have. Yeah, Darius.
Jim Ross. Thorgrim with a choke slam to QUEEK.
Yeah. True fact.
QUEEK Cena just tapped out.
No.
Darius Rose, how come Nodwell didn't augment him to live long? So what's implied, it's never directly stated, but what's very heavily implied is that to Nodwell, QUEEK is a useful tool.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So I think this was actually quite easy. QUEEK is unstable. He's mad. He's insane. No matter how much he might have other advantages, he's unstable. He was raised from birth to be the perfect warlord. And what Nodwell got instead was an imperfect warlord. So he is a creation that Nodwell fully understands and is willing to use. And I think if QUEEK had succeeded, he might have even dangled him for further until he just died of old age, because he's, as QUEEK, super dangerous. Because he's unpredictable in a bad way, but also super predictable for Nodwell because he raised him. Nobody knows what would have happened afterwards. So the basic answer is he's scared of him and what he might become. But more realistically, he just wants to use him. It's that simple. And the easiest way to use him is to keep on dangling in front of him. If he fails, someone else will succeed. He's just another tool to Nodwell, and a tool that is both imperfect but potentially perfect for the job at hand.
Yeah, because for those that don't know, like the Vermin Lords plot ends up being, of course, that Thanquol ends up getting Thorgrim's head. So that Thanquol can ascend to the Council of 13 under Screech Vermin King. Because Screech is fucking terrifying. And the other Vermin Lords, when they realize what Screech is going for, realize that to go against him would be an idiot's move. So if QUEEK had succeeded in killing Thorgrim, what likely is what would have happened is that Screech or an agent of Screech would have killed QUEEK to then give the skull to Thanquol.
Yeah.
Darius Rose, me, for the tapping out of John Cena, the head of for the head of Gunther, for the booking of the World's Retirement Tour and the kissing of Sean, the head of Triple H. Singemeister, nerve gas, hell pit abominations, and blowing up the moon were cool. Yeah, there were. I have mixed feelings about the nerve gas hell pit abominations. I thought the concept was cool, but the execution I didn't really like because the hell pits. I'll put it this way: the end times loved hell pits, which was fine. The amount of times that the end times used the gimmick of a hell pit just died. Oh, just kidding, it came back to life. I did not like it. They used that trope way too many times. Particularly during the Kanak-Kadrin incident and the Battle of Carragate Peaks. And it felt overplayed, in my opinion. Ricky Chapman, QUEEK gave the Vermin Lord a traditional Skaven retirement, a heavy chain wrapped around him and thrown into the marshes of Skaven Black. Yes, the Skaven Mafia, my favorite.
Yeah, fair. So, what you said you had a nice little crazy theory you wanted to end on, or a next what if sort of idea.
Yeah. So one of the tidbits that's always a bit fun to discuss with QUEEK, I think, at the end of the day, because we talked a little bit about this for you didn't mention Ungrim's. Well, it's not important to QUEEK's story. QUEEK's dead. Yeah, Ungrim shows up.
That's a different story and a different component, and we're focusing on QUEEK here.
Yeah. The thing about QUEEK that I find so fascinating is, for me, for Warhammer in general, I think QUEEK is the perfect example of when a writer creates a character, and because for those that don't know, like the whole concept of QUEEK's heads talking to him kind of just comes out of nowhere. Yeah. I believe in the novel. I don't think he had that in any. Yeah, in the army books. Like David Diamond had a character that had a cool mini, and was like fun, and literally turned him into a iconic character. Like I genuinely think the Headtaker novel is one of the best Black Library fantasy novels ever.
Yeah, and I think this is a fine example of where Black Library does its job really well. In that it takes something that we already know from Warhammer, in this case, a general character, QUEEK Headtaker. He's a great Skaven general, one of the biggest Skaven. He kicks ass and chews gum, and he's got a sword called Dwarf Gouger. Yay! And says, what am I going to do to tell a really interesting story? And he tells one. And he takes the character that's been very loosely described inside the army lists, generally given like a half page or a quarter page or whatever's needed for that particular book, and adds a whole ton of depth. And that ton of depth is good depth. QUEEK is a great Skaven character. And I'm going to span this up alongside some of the best, our Thanquols of the world, characters who've had a lot of extra detail added. QUEEK, it doesn't just stand shoulder to shoulder with them because of these novels, I actually prefer better than them in some respects, both because he had his great successes and his multiple failures, and not comic failures, which is generally how Thanquol is presented. An idiot who comically messes up again and again and again, yet somehow always comes out on top because he's a favorite. Okay, no, QUEEK's genuinely fucking brilliant and touched and bizarre and mad and has some weirdness attached to him that needs some weird explanation if you want to go into the explanation, but actually explaining it is less interesting than the character we have. Who cares why QUEEK is speaking away to all these heads and they can do their thing? He is, and it's doing stuff. And that makes the character fascinating because there's these interesting black holes in the lore where you're left going, well, why? Why is this? Why? It can't just be he's mad. I don't care what the writer says. It literally can't just be he's mad because of many of the things that happen because of it. So what's the extra detail there? And it makes not just a fascinating character to look at and explore because of all of the deeds, but to look at and explore for what it means to the lore as well, which is obviously for us at Lorebeards a good thing.
Yep. Holy Art, it's not the war pick was Dwarf Gouger. It is. Yeah, the sword is just a regular sword. Dwarf Gouger is the war pick.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and QUEEK, the thing that I really love about QUEEK is I encourage people to look at him, especially when you're writing your own stuff, about how to write a character that fits into the setting. And this is going to sound weird, but I'll explain. Adding a character that is very powerful respectfully into the setting. And what I mean by that is QUEEK Headtaker is introduced as one of the big badasses of Warhammer. And he is. Like if you open up, the Skaven army book for 8th edition or 7th edition, technically, QUEEK Headtaker, if you're looking for a combat character, QUEEK Headtaker is one of your best combat characters. He's got a pretty bitchin' stat line. He's very spooky. But in the grand scheme of the world, he's not that crazy. Like he's very spooky for a Skaven. He's like, one of the top 4 probably most dangerous Skaven that we know about. But
no, he's not.
Well, no, I mean
the counts are 13 are all above him.
Yeah, a playable.
Yeah, that might be better.
Playable Skaven. But QUEEK, he's very like mid-tier in the grand scheme of the world. And the fact that he's very consistently shown to be that when he's dealing with nameless people or people that are just introduced in a novel, he curb stomps them. Like, QUEEK is fucking terrifying. He feels like a god. There's a whole part in Headtaker where the Gracer Razzle, who is the Gracer of that book, shows up with 3 bodyguards from the Council of 13. And these are legit council guard. So these are the Whiteford mute storm vermin that can't speak, and they're supposed to be like, they're treated with almost like iconic demigod status. And they're not only scared of QUEEK kills one of them very casually. I think he ends up killing all 3 of them by the end of the story. But like, he duels one of them, and it's like, it's a bit of a fight, but QUEEK just absolutely massacres him.
Yep.
And you're like, holy shit, QUEEK is like unstoppable. But in the same book, they go, oh, well, look, QUEEK's about to fight a special character, and he fights Gorfang Rotgut, and he can't even hurt him.
Yep.
Like, QUEEK can't hurt him. He goes all in with Dwarf Gouger, and his armor is so thick. Like, this is an actual legendary unstoppable baddie who, even in the grand scheme, isn't that big. Like, Gorfang Rotgut isn't like Scarbrand. He's not a greater demon. He's spooky, but he's not the spookiest. So the thing that I love so much about the QUEEK books is they show you such a good way of having a character who feels like he's in the top 1%, but realistically he's like in the top 50%. But how exciting being in the top 50% can be. Because then when he does get into a scenario where he meets Scarbrand, he goes, fuck that, I'm out of here. Right. And you're like, oh, well, okay, this universe makes a lot more sense now. And it's like really cool. Whereas like if you're playing tabletop, genuinely, if you have QUEEK in a unit of Storm Vermin and you see a Scarbrand, you're probably going to go, oh, I can fuck him up. I got it. I got it. Which is silly because that's not what it would do in lore.
Hey, I've got a rank bonus. I'm going to win this combat.
Yeah. And QUEEK has so many fun, iconic things that you get enough to wonder about and to theorize, but you don't get direct answers. How do QUEEK's heads work? Well, we don't know the exact details, but we can guess. Why does QUEEK hate Greyseers? We don't know the exact details, but we could guess. Why does he hate Clan Eshin? We don't know the exact details, but we could guess. And it's fun. He's one of the best, like, and I don't mean the best character as in like he's the best written purely from a novel perspective, or he's the best, but I think he's the best, and he is the perfect chemical lab balance. He's like a perfectly distilled character of just the right amount of details, just the right amount of history that you feel like he has lived a very full, we talked about last stream, but debatably too much in 10 years, but he's lived a very full 10 years where it feels like you can trace his life from birth to death.
Yep.
Which is
so
unfortunately rare in Warhammer. Like, very, very rare. It's just not something we get often, and it's such a treat. It's such a treat for QUEEK.
Yep, agreed. Well, we got our last super chats.
Yep. All right. So, Gaston. So naturally, the next poll is build a QUEEK skull. I mean, that's something you can very easily do. He had
a lot of them. Yeah.
I think we will politely excuse ourselves from that one, but it's something you can absolutely do. Ricky Chapman, in a TTRPG campaign at the Battle of Everpeak, we had the cool reveal that all the statues in the hold were actually runic guardians. The dwarves didn't just march on their foe, but the hold itself marched with them. That's awesome. That's great.
That's also something that's this isn't an unexpected outcome. For example, if we go all the way back to Citadel Journal number 2, you got Azram the Mighty, who was a dwarf god back then, and Azram the Mighty built the Colossi, which were gigantic dwarfs who sat around the holds and would go to war during essential moments. So this is something that's been in the setting since the early 80s. So this is just a great reveal of what Warhammer has to offer. But yeah, not many people speak about Azram. The only reason that's sitting on my mind is because I very recently did a bunch of dwarf gods for Lawhammer, which I did an icon for each one of them over on the Lawhammer Discord. And we now have 20 dwarf ancestor gods up there for a bit of fun. Boy. But most of those are cited from the most extreme sources that you'll ever find. People like Azram the Mighty. No one knows Azram anymore because Azram the Mighty is no longer important. But one of the great things about Lawhammer is that it often delves into the deeper, more unexpected corners of the lore.
Bring back Azram! Yeah,
Azram! But yeah, totally. And in our one, for any who watch the stream, you know the devastating cost of the death of Azram and what it caused to the dwarves over in the Lawhammer version of the tale.
Yeah, I will say one of the biggest fuck yous that the end times did to dwarf players was not giving them runic guardians for the end times, because that has been a promise that's been sitting in the lore for so long, is that when magic would come flooding back into the world, the guardians would reawaken,
all of them. And that should have been in the end times, man. So much cool could have come from that, particularly given some of the interesting stories you could have told with the Dawi Zar and the Dawi as well. There's so much missed there.
Joe Miller, 3-part series: 1, build a clan; 2, build their stronghold; 3, build their leader. Maybe that is something we can certainly consider doing.
That could almost be a single stream as well, depending upon how it's spun.
Yeah, honestly, we could probably just do a build a clan and answer all of those questions as part of it. Jack Ruby, Ryan, how much for the Let's Build Queethel Gristlegut? We wouldn't. So I would respectfully say we wouldn't, because he's already built.
He's already built.
He's already a full designed demon prince. Chaos god, according
Chaos
to
minor god thing.
Yeah, according to 30K for some reason. So that.
Well, he was a chaos god in the previous one. He wasn't just
oh, okay. I couldn't.
Yeah, demon prince. He was a chaos god. A minor chaos god.
Yeah, but that pretty much brings us to the end of the QUEEK saga.
Yeah. So my summary for QUEEK is super easy, which is QUEEK is one of Warhammer's better characters. We have a beginning. Oh, did you want to say something?
I want to add one thing. Yes, I want to add one thing, which is for anyone that's like, okay, I get that QUEEK is super awesome, but like, what's the deal? I want to give you a good example of a character that they kind of tried to do this for and they failed. As just a brief comparison, which is Karl Franz.
Oh.
Karl Franz is a very messy character. But one of the things that makes him genuinely suck, and I say this with all the love of my heart, one of the things that makes him suck as a character is that anytime they tried to add to him, going from like 6th edition forward, they treat him like he's some sort of legendary demigod.
Untouchable demigod at that.
That makes him kind of weird and boring. We're like, the earliest story we have of him is that as a babe, his father and him were traveling by carriage to Altdorf, and they get attacked by a Minotaur horde and saved by the Wood Elves. And it's very much implied to be like a destiny thing, that he's saved by the Wood Elves, or like that he gets Deathclaw, his griffin, as a gift from the Wood Elves, instead of it just being something he had earlier in life. Also, that it also implies Deathclaw is way younger than he probably should be, because Deathclaw is probably like easily into like his teens or 20s, but the Wood Elf timeline has it where like he's like 10, which is not old enough for how big he is.
There's lots of interest. I mean, we're going to have to do a Carl Franz stream one day because
definitely.
He is not just a messy character because his timeline doesn't work. It doesn't. He's a messy character because when you actually look at everything they've added, he has a lot of problematic details. So that could be super fun.
So but I just want to say he's a good example of a character that we have a lot of information on, but it's not well designed.
Yeah, agreed. Where QUEEK, by comparison, is the opposite. He has a neat beginning, a middle, and an end. He has some super fun stories. He's got a lot of open space where you can add lore, and it fits within his timeline. Indeed, even QUEEK himself. That's interesting. Yep. QUEEK even has some interesting loopholes in his timeline where he's done extra stuff like traveled through the Empire and done things there where you can add extra detail if you wish. He's a Skaven with a lot of space for extra development if anyone wishes to take him further, but also a complete story. And I do think he stands as a direct comparison with characters like Carl Franz, where they've added detail, and often deeply contradictory detail and detail that no longer makes sense given some of the previous detail that had been added, or worse, some of the detail that comes after, as the next person just rewrites what came before and rewrites it again. QUEEK hasn't had that problem. QUEEK is a consistent character. Now, he may have been developed. He started off as just a simple warlord special character inside the 4th edition of the Skaven army list. And he got developed massively by not just the novels, but also by the end times. But none of that development contradicted what came before. It was all taking what was there and respectfully enhancing it and bringing it up to be something super, super cool. QUEEK is Warhammer done right, to the point that when we hit the end times, he doesn't suck. And so many of the characters, when they hit the end times, do, because their characters no longer act like they used to in the previous versions of them, as they've got a story that they're desperately trying to throw out and end. But QUEEK's story in the end times not just makes sense, it also develops the character that we had and gives a conclusion that really works well for him. It's great. He's a great character. I love QUEEK. He's not one of those characters that's the most important, the greatest mover or shaker. He's no Marathi, for example. Our streams about Marathi very clearly show why she is of extraordinary importance to Warhammer. QUEEK isn't of extraordinary importance to Warhammer, not in the greater scheme of the whole Warhammer world. What he is Warhammer done well. Unlike Marathi, she is Warhammer done terribly. QUEEK is good Warhammer. And if you want to see some good Warhammer, go check out QUEEK stuff, because he rocks. And that's my conclusion for him.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it, is that this is to show what a badass QUEEK is. We have 2 streams of talking about what QUEEK is rather than what QUEEK should have been, which is what Lorebeards normally is.
Most of our streams are often, this is everything that the lore says, and this is where it kind of messed up, and we could make sense of it if we add this cool detail, which justifies all of this stuff. And we often have to come up with reasons for why the lore as we understand it exists, because it doesn't have any. They're just open black holes of lore that make no sense. QUEEK isn't that. QUEEK is kind of awesome, and it's nice that we can just sit back and enjoy it, because finally Ryan's penance is over. He no longer is sitting here saying, I will do QUEEK, and it hasn't been done. It's been a great joy for me also, I would just like to say, because I got to sit back for most of this stream and add almost nothing. It's freaking awesome to be able to just sit here and go, I don't need to worry about this. I can just let him chat on forever.
Not to be a new year. Time to get back to work. Back to work.
Yeah, it's a good one. And QUEEK kicks ass. So I'm really glad that we got that one out of the way.
Morning, Chris. I want to thank you for that message. Next up, Lorebeards After Dark. QUEEK does Ryan.
Thanks for that one, Mornington. I mean, really? That's an image.
That's funny. Let's see. Joe Miller, guys, do you realize how long that single stream would be? You ain't get no. Karl Franz would definitely be a two-parter. Like,
I think more. I think simply discussing the old version of Karl Franz and how it develops into the newer one around 4th edition, that's almost a stream by itself, because there's an enormous story there. Because to understand what Karl Franz becomes, you kind of need to understand where he came from. Karl Franz he's one of those ones where we might end up hitting like a 3-stream. Plus, we also have the end times to discuss for Karl Franz, a core component of who he is. That would probably be a stream. Christ.
Yeah,
he just keeps going, that one.
Yeah. I would predict that Karl Franz will essentially be like Marathi, where it's a 3-parter, ultimately.
Yeah.
I think because it would be the evolution of Karl Franz.
It really would. And unlike Marathi, where we have ourselves interwoven pieces all about that effectively build a giant story that Games Workshop didn't realize, with Karl Franz, Games Workshop just simply rewrote him and turned him into something else, and turned him into, from birth, effectively a demigod. And a demigod that come the end times happens. Oh, building a Skaven clan and doing it all that way. I understand.
We could totally do that in a 3-hour stream.
Karl Franz is a problem in terms of how best to present him, because he's so different in different versions of him.
Oh, they were talking about the build of Skaven clan. Well,
thanks for that one, Joe.
Yeah, I think we could do that in 3. I think we could, because the
polls clan is a clear one.
Yeah, the polls would be the only thing I think that would really slow us down, but we've gotten pretty quick at those, so I don't think we'd have as many issues as you might suspect. Stephen Lucas, Empire Wood Elf. They're called the Lorelorn Elves. Moving on.
Yes, the Aenir.
Yeah, Stephen Lucas, what side of the mountains would Elves save France? Oh,
and Nyath is attached to it at one point as well, so probably the southern ones.
Yeah, so it's in the Wood Elf army book. So it's the Atho-Loren Elves, but it should have been the Lorelorn Elves.
100% should have been, particularly because it's also how the Lorelorn Elves work. They are the political ones that intervene, where the Wood Elves of the Atho-Loren aren't. They're the ones who tend to turtle down like dwarves and then just attack.
It's one of those situations where Atho-Loren being involved didn't really make sense. Other than the whole 8th edition book was trying really hard to say, how do I make a convincing argument that the Atho-Loren are a global faction that could show up and fight anybody? And it does make the argument really well, but it goes a little crazy in a few places.
I agree. And it could have easily tackled many of the subjects in a different way and still given them a very strong world-facing faction.
Yeah. But anyway, that's our time. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone. That was amazing. Make sure you do join us. Is it Wednesday? I've lost track of what the days are, because is it Tuesdays? Yeah, of course it is. It'll be a Tuesday. I have no idea what day it is today. It's just been a frenzy of either poorliness or alternatively festiveness, because of obviously the time of year that we're in, and also my daughter's birthday. But do make sure you join us for Tuesday, because it's going to be a fun one where we're going to be reviewing the year and having a little look at all the things that have happened for Lorebeards, for Warhammer, and of course, for yourselves, because it will be somewhat of an Ask Us Anything as well. So if you've got any questions that have been burning away, make sure you come in and join us, because we are willing to tackle them.
Yep. So join us on Tuesday at 3 p.m. CST, 9
p.m. UK.
It's going to be a nice chill time.
It is.
It should be a good time.
You're a bit late.
Literally everything. But the good news is the VOD is.
Thanks for that.
So I'm going to go finish building a shed, because we're
enjoy the shed.
We're fucking finishing it. All right. Bye, guys.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.